Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the City Planning Commission public meeting. And, Madam Secretary, please begin.
Good morning. This is the City Planning Commission public meeting held in Spector Hall, 22 Reade Street. Today is Wednesday, May 25th, 2016. As a courtesy during the proceedings, we ask that you please turn off all cell phones and beepers. All speakers should fill out a speaker's card at the desk outside of Spector Hall. In addition, we ask that those providing testimony please identify yourself, limit your remarks to 3 minutes, and speak clearly into the microphone. I will now call the roll. Chairman Weisbrod.
Here.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Here.
Commissioner Besser.
Here.
Commissioner Cantor.
Here.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Here.
Commissioner Delahousse.
Here.
Commissioner Dweck.
Here.
Okay.
Timing is exquisite. No one has been able to time it that well in years.
Commissioner Edie.
Here.
Commissioner Fran.
Here.
Commissioner Knight.
Here.
Commissioner Levin.
Here.
Commissioner Marin.
Here.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Here.
A quorum is present. The first item is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, May 11, 2016.
On the minutes, may I have a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, the minutes are approved.
Scheduling, on calendar numbers 1, 2, and 3, we have resolutions for adoption, scheduling Wednesday, June 8, 2016, for a public hearing to be held in Spector Hall, 22 Reade Street.
On the resolutions, may I have a motion to approve? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, the resolutions are approved.
The next part of the calendar is the report section on page 3. Borough of Brooklyn, calendar numbers 4, 5, and 6. Calendar number 4, CD1, C160124ZSK. Calendar number 5, C160125ZSK. Calendar number 6, N160126ZRK. In the matter of applications for zoning text and special permits concerning 19-25 Kent Avenue. For favorable reports on calendar numbers 4 and 5, and for a favorable report as modified on calendar number 6. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delahousse.
Hi, good morning. First, I want to say that this development team should be applauded for their willingness to innovate. And I also want to say that I support the concept of an industrial business incentive area. But I believe this individual project proposal, and more specifically the citywide text amendment, have not benefited from a thorough analysis to inform a fair and appropriate ratio of industrial space to commercial space, nor benefited from the necessary input from all potentially impacted communities across the city. If we value as a city the industrial business sector and the good-paying, family-supporting jobs with limited barriers to entry that this sector is known to produce, then public policy, including land use policy, must reflect those values in the ratios or minimum square footage requirements for the industrial uses and the monitoring and enforcement requirements to ensure the industrial spaces are leased to industrial businesses that promote the goals we are seeking, namely job-intensive light industrial uses. We know from the Brooklyn Navy Yard that there is an excess demand for these spaces, and we know that the threat to the industrial sector through land use loopholes and real estate speculation is real. This proposal has not been analyzed nor vetted sufficiently, in my opinion, to know if the right balance has been struck to ensure feasibility and to achieve our public purpose goals. Nor have we included the appropriate monitoring and enforcement mechanisms to ensure it can work. For those reasons, I must vote no, and I hope that the City Council can address a number of these concerns. Thank you.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
I share virtually all of Commissioner Delahuse's concerns about this and have as this has moved through the public process. But we are modifying the text as it was originally applied to, so that it will now apply really only to a single site, and as such, it really is a single-site experiment. And for all of the hoped-for benefits of this experiment, and I believe it should move forward. I think our report now includes the appropriate cautionary language that makes it clear that we're not setting citywide policy, and that before this text can be, or a similar mechanism can be applied to other sites, there will be the kind of review and analysis that Commissioner Dela Uz laments did not take place here. So on that very limited basis, I vote yes.
Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Favorable reports have been adopted on calendar numbers 4 and 5, and a favorable report as modified has been adopted on calendar number 6. Borough of Queens, calendar number 7, CD1, N160276 PXQ, in the matter of a notice of intent to acquire office space for use of property located at 36-36 33rd Street. For a favorable report on calendar number 7, Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 7. Borough of Queens, calendar number 8, CD2, N160277 PXQ, in the matter of a notice of intent to acquire office space for use of property located at 1 Court Square. For a favorable report on calendar number 8, Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 8. Borough of Queens, calendar number 9, CD11, N160203ZAQ, in the matter of an application for the grant of an authorization concerning 255-23 58th Avenue for adoption on calendar number 9. Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 9 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 10, CD2, N160087ZCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 704 Ocean Terrace for adoption on calendar number 10. Chairman Weisbrod.
This is a sort of an anomalous provision of the zoning resolution, which limits the commission's jurisdiction really to a decision on whether a specific set of facts has been met. And in this particular case, it is clear that those particular facts have been met. I appreciate the concerns of many in the community regarding this particular application. In my view, and I think in staff's view, the appropriate remedy here or approach would be for the community, if it feels that this is not the kind of development appropriate for this particular area, the community should file an application to modify the zoning so that this kind of development does not occur in the future. But given the very limited jurisdiction and really proscriptive charge to this commission under these circumstances, I vote yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
I associate with the remarks of the chair. I vote yes.
Commissioner Bessa.
Thank you, Chair Weisbrod, and to the department for taking the time to respond to Borough President Otto's concerns. The Borough President respectfully disagrees with the agency's position to certify. He also believes replacing a community of well-sited, sprawling, one-story, one-family detached ranch homes with a stand of nondescript three-story townhomes is inappropriate and will not complement the neighborhood. We look forward to working with the department on rezoning such areas in the future, and I vote no.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
With deep appreciation of the comments of Commissioner Besser and particularly to you, Chairman Weisbrod, I abstain.
Okay. Commissioner Delauss.
Vote yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 10 has been adopted. The next part of the calendar is the public hearing section on page 15. Borough of Brooklyn, calendar number 11, CD 13, C160093 ZSK. A public hearing in the matter of an application for the grant of a special permit concerning 2700 Stillwell Avenue.
The first speaker is Todd Dale.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. My name is Todd Dale. I'm here on behalf of the applicant for this matter. It's a special permit application pursuant to Section 106-32 of the zoning resolution that seeks to modify yard requirements and allow construction of a proposed one-story warehouse in M12 zoning district that's located within the special Coney Island mixed-use district. This site is located at 2700 Stillwell Avenue. It's on the west side of Stillwell Avenue, north of Neptune Avenue, and south of the Belt Parkway. The site's currently vacant. It was most recently developed with a one-story structure that was demolished in 2013. Stillwell Avenue at the premises is a wide street. It's mapped to 100-foot width, has multiple lanes of traffic both ways. And the area contains a mix of low-rise commercial, manufacturing, and residential uses. This application seeks to maximize the lot coverage of the property in order to create a one-story building with a viable floor plate for the proposed warehouse use. It seeks to provide approximately 3,996 square foot building, no front yard, no side yards, and then a rear yard of 18.89 feet. The building would have an FAR of 0.84 and be 23 feet in height. The relief is sought via the special permit because pursuant to the special district requirements, when there are residential uses adjacent to the property, greater yards are required. A 15-foot yard would be required to the north of the property, as this is an existing residential use. And then at the rear of the building, it's actually two lots that abut to the rear of the property. This is an existing commercial automobile use. This one here is existing commercial automobile use. But for an extent of only 10 feet here at the rear, this lot does have a residential use. And for that reason, a 30-foot rear yard would be required. So this little yellow section and this yellow section would need to be taken out of the building for an as-of-right permitted development. Absent the proposed special permit, it would not be possible to create a viable warehouse because the building would only be 25 feet with a erratic depth. The warehouse, they're estimating it's going to have 3 employees, would generate a maximum of 6 trips daily. They would receive deliveries only 1 to 2 times a week. It's intended to be a contractor supply warehouse, and they estimate approximately 5 to 10 trips per day, primarily with small vans to pick up materials for contractors in the area. Finally, Community Board 13 did recommend approval of the application. Brooklyn Borough President recommended approval of the application, and we did receive a letter of support from this property owner, the residential use to the north, which would be use primarily affected by this proposed development in support of this application. Happy to
Thank you,
answer
Mr.
any
Dale.
questions.
Questions for Mr. Dale? Ms. Efron.
Thank you very much. Will there be an overhead garage door in the back open to the yard, or will there be any noise that will go into the yard from there?
No use, no garage door. It's going to be just an open space back there. They're actually thinking paving, I believe with permeated to paving to help drainage, but no use, no access to their garage.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Ms. Levin.
Yes, it's very helpful to have the letter from the property owner to the north. I wonder, have you been in touch with the residential use out back?
To be honest, I believe there may have been some initial effort, but primarily the focus was on this particular owner because they would have been the lot most directly affected. This particular building here, there's actually a 4-foot space here, approximately 4 feet, and this is almost 19, so there still will be a 23-foot separation. This is only a 1-story building, so the proposed development, the thought was it wouldn't disturb the light and the air of that particular building. To be honest, I believe that building is vacant, but
Okay. Yeah, no, it's odd. It's a little landlocked back
it's
there.
strange.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Dale.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this matter? If not, the hearing is closed. Thank you.
Borough of Queens, calendar number 12, CD 6, N160304, PXQ. A public hearing in the matter of a notice of intent to acquire office space for use of property located at 118-35 Queens Boulevard.
First speaker is Dale Lazarson. Welcome back, Ms. Lazarson.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. I am here to present and support the 195 Notice of Intent to Acquire Office Space in front of you. This is for the acquisition under a lease of approximately 18,000 square feet of office and garage space located in the Forest Hills section of Queens at the building known as Forest Hills Tower at 118-35 Queens Boulevard. In general, the Queens office class A, B, and C market is about 34 million square feet. By comparison, Brooklyn is about 46 million square feet, and Manhattan is a whopping 365 million square feet. Queens has approximately 300,000 square feet of new construction underway, and the vacancy rate in these classes is somewhere around 10 to 12%. As Dana Driscoll with the Department of City Planning described on Monday, this building is a 17-story commercial office tower of approximately 335,000 square feet. Tenancies are of a mixed nature, primarily professional, but including Plaza College, DCAS, citywide testing and application centers here, as well as Board of Elections is underway to be located here. And FEMA was previously a tenant, but they have, I think for the most part, vacated. The owner of this building is Must Development, a very large and respectable developer and owner throughout the boroughs. They have some signature properties, including the Manhattan Hotel in downtown Brooklyn. The city has several tenancies with Must Development throughout the boroughs. The 18,000 square feet of lease proposed under this particular 195 notice will be used by the NYPD, Office of Queens Traffic Enforcement. This group has oversight of all traffic activities and intersection activities throughout the borough of Queens, and they also respond in all boroughs to emergency situations. The proposed space is located on the garage levels 3 and 4 of the building, and it will be improved to meet city standards for office as well as the garage space. NYPD will have 46 dedicated parking spaces for it, of which some will be for smart cars, smart vehicles. The proposed lease is a 20-year lease with some options and a city standard termination right. This is a relocation for the NYPD. They are currently located at 16601 Hillsdale Avenue, I believe, Hillside Avenue. Yeah. They have about 14,000 square feet. They have been at that building since the early 90s. The space is pretty inefficient, the configuration, and with the NYPD's more efficient operations as well as growth, the space can no longer accommodate their needs. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Lazarson. Questions? Hearing none.
I should mention also that a representative from the NYPD, I believe, okay, well, coincidentally, Deputy Director Sepulveda is stuck in traffic. So, with that, good morning.
We always warn you, Ms. Lazarson, don't go beyond what you have to go beyond.
I will learn my lesson.
Any questions for Ms. Lazarson? Hearing none, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this matter, who happens to be here? And, hearing none, the hearing is closed.
Borough of the Bronx, calendar number 13, CD4, N160305, PXX. A public hearing in the matter of a notice of intent to acquire office space for use of property located at 260 East 161st Street.
The first speaker is Ken Majors from the New York City Law Department.
Good morning, Chairman Weisbrod, Vice Chairman Knuckles, distinguished members of the committee. My name is Ken Majoris. I'm the Deputy Chief of Administration for the New York City Law Department. I'm here to speak in support of our application to lease office space for the Law Department at 260 East 161st Street. New staff being hired for the Tort Division's Bronx Borough Office will occupy this office. The Tort Division's cases span a wide range of issues, including complex issues of governmental and qualified immunity, matters involving the boundaries of duty and foreseeability, interpretation and application of the federal and state constitutions and civil statutes, the extent of property interests and potential recovery for violating those interests, and straightforward negligence cases such as trip and falls, accidents in city-owned buildings, and injuries sustained from car accidents. Tort alone defends more than 20,000 cases currently pending against the city, its agencies, and employees. Approximately 7,500 new tort cases are filed against the city each year, and more than 6,000 cases are resolved annually by trial, motion, practice, and settlement. OMB has funded the verticalization of 2 of our borough offices in the FY17 executive budget. The majority of tort cases have been handled in a horizontal manner, meaning that no one attorney takes ownership over the case, and that as tasks become due, someone is assigned to complete the task. The law department has long sought to verticalize our tort practice. Under this approach, attorneys are directly assigned to develop case strategy and implement that strategy by handling all tasks and events throughout the life of the case. Verticalization not only strengthens defense, but also enables more proactive handling of the litigation. In fiscal year 13, the law department verticalized state court law enforcement cases commenced in the Bronx, and we just recently moved into our space at 7075 Grand Concourse. We expanded to verticalize state law enforcement cases citywide in FY15. This strategy has proven successful, and as part of our annual budget process, we proposed to expand this model to non-law enforcement cases. To do so requires an increase in staffing, and after careful evaluation of our request, OMB concurred with our proposal. With additional staff, this office will be restructured to accommodate the handling of cases by attorneys assigned to the cases from inception to conclusion. Thank you for allowing me to testify today, and I'm happy to answer any operational questions you may have.
Questions for Mr. Majoris? Ms. Delausse?
Mr. Majoris, thank you for being here. Just since you raised the point about the verticalization of cases and that necessitates an increase in staffing. So I'm just wondering if, as part of the analysis, especially since you piloted already with the state court cases, I think you said, has that resulted in a decrease in the amount of damages that the city has had to pay out to offset that increase in cost and staffing?
Yes, it has. And so part of looking at the reduction in cases, of new cases filed over time, multiplying that by our average payout is how we arrived at a cost savings for DCAS. And yes, the judgment and claim payout has been decreasing again for us.
Thank you.
Mr. Majoris, by my count, there will be roughly 80 people at this location for
Yes.
40,000 square feet of space, which is, on a per-person basis, seems extraordinarily generous by law firm standards and by general office standards. And I guess my question to you is, why do you need 40,000 square feet of space, which comes to roughly 500 square feet per person?
I think that Jason Ortiz is here from DCAS, and he's probably better positioned to answer that question. The 40,000 square foot number is a landlord number, I believe, for the square footage on the space. The actual rentable square space, as I understand it, comes down to 31,389, which brings us down to a square foot per employee of 236, but I think Jason can probably walk you through that.
It comes to roughly 400 square feet per person, where the average for office workers is under 200 feet per person.
I think I have to defer to Jason on that. DCAS actually negotiates all of that and has a better handle on. We make our presentation as to the number of people going in and the requirements we have as to hearing rooms and conference rooms, the training room, We make those presentations, and then a test fit is put together. And the test fit looks great, but we certainly don't intend to overbuild it all.
Well, it should look great at this. The entire Bronx Tort Division will be located here?
No, we will still be bifurcated. We have approximately 61 to 65 staff that are over 198 East 161st Street. That lease is running until 2022, I believe. So we would not be giving up that space. These are all new hires going into this space.
And is the functionality between the two locations different, or are they both essentially?
Initially, they will be different because the people who are handling cases horizontally will continue that with the existing matters, and all new matters will be assigned to go vertical. But until we have the space, we can't really assign those cases, so we're starting out with whatever people we can cram into 100 Church Street and beginning to assign cases there. But it will take us several years to ramp up.
But, and just so I understand that, between the two Bronx locations, the goal ultimately is that they will each handle essentially the same kinds of cases in the same way.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So it's not like, do you happen to know how much space you have at the other Bronx location?
Yes, I do. We have 8,000 square feet approximately.
And that's for how many employees will
That is
ultimately
for
be there?
61 people.
That will ultimately be there?
It will stay there, yes.
Um,
At that site, we are beyond overcrowded. Attorneys are sharing offices. There are 3 and 4 attorneys in some offices that were converted from EBT rooms. The space has become wholly unsatisfactory.
I don't understand, you're getting 40,000 square feet in one location for 80 employees and 8,000 square feet for 60 employees in another location, and both locations will ultimately have the same functionality? That just doesn't seem very sensible.
The $40,000 number I really would like to punt to.
40,000 square feet.
The number we believe is 31,000 for rentable square feet. Some people will probably move out of 198 East 161st so we can get back to the appropriately sized EBT rooms and get attorneys who are sharing offices into private offices. The space itself, maybe that's the space is being built out for 95 people, ultimately.
How many, just remind me, how many employees are moving from the first location to to this new location? Do you know?
That has not been determined with tort yet, but there are somewhere in the ballpark of 20 people that could easily move out of there, but I think it'll be a smaller number than that.
Smaller number than that?
Smaller number than 20. But ultimately, I believe we will fill every seat in that location, in the new location.
Mr. Dweck?
In the new proposed space, how many EBT rooms and conference rooms do you envision
We'll
having?
have 6 EBT rooms, which when we fill out the 57 attorney offices means 1 EBT room for every about 10 attorneys, roughly. We'll have 3 conference rooms that seat 16 people each.
16?
16 to 24 if you put in side chairs. And those 3 conference rooms can either be used separately or joined together. It'll be the first time that the Bronx can actually have a full staff meeting once we get those.
Do you know the approximate size of the conference rooms? Square footage?
No.
And of the EBT
Not
rooms?
with me. I'm sorry, no, I don't have that number with me.
Thank you.
I can get the number back to you if you want.
Ms. Efron?
Thank you. Maybe this is a question for DCAS, but perhaps you have the answer. It looks as if legal aid, Bronx District Attorney, and ACS are already in the building. So rather than try to discern a rentable versus a usable square footage, do you have any idea how many employees per square foot they are operating in?
No, I don't.
Perhaps somebody from DCAS does. Especially Bronx, the ACS space, which presumably was done through DCAS, or at least they have access to that information.
Any other questions for Mr. Majoris? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Cantor.
Do we have any idea, or perhaps it will come from another person, what is the net to gross average of the other buildings? You've told us it's 40,000, is effectively a 30,000 square foot floor plate functionally. No. Which is 25% less. Do we know statistically what kind of loss factor we have on other buildings?
I'm certain that DCAS has the answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Majoris.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Dina Maniotis from the Chief Medical Examiner's Office. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Very correct.
Good, thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, Chairman Weisbrod and members of the Planning Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I am Dina Maniotis, Executive Deputy Commissioner for the Office of Chief Medical Examiner. I'm here to speak in support of our application for a new space for the OCME's Family Services Center in the Bronx. I'll tell you more about Family Center operations in a moment, but first I'd like to provide a brief introduction to the mission and jurisdiction of the Office of Chief Medical Examiner. The office is responsible for investigating deaths resulting from criminal violence, accidents, or suicides that occur suddenly when someone is in apparent good health, when unattended by a physician, while in custody, or occurring in any suspicious or unusual manner. From the Hirsch Center for Forensic Sciences, located at the Bellevue campus, the office provides additional forensic services including molecular genetics, testing, and DNA testing in support of criminal investigations. The OCME is also the city's mortuary and manages all mortuary functions, including removal of deceased persons from institutions and from individual homes. The OCME operates 3 forensic pathology centers, one at Queens County Hospital campus, one at NYU Langone campus, and one at Queens Hospital campus. Pathology center functions include forensic identifications, autopsy services, and decedent storage. Additionally, the OCME operates 5 family services centers, including one co-located at each of the 3 campuses just identified, and also one at Jacoby Hospital campus in the Bronx, and one at Seaview Hospital in Staten Island. Until 2015, the forensic pathology functions and the Family Services Center were co-located at the Jacoby campus. Following the transfer of pathology and mortuary functions from the Bronx to the Queens and Manhattan campuses, we requested DCAS's support to identify suitable smaller space for our Family Services Center at a more easily accessible location near public transportation. I'd like to pause and punctuate something here. The only function that occurs at Family Services Centers is family identifications, and families may go to any one of our 5 centers that is most conveniently located to them to make an identification. When a family is requested to come to our office to identify their loved one, they do so at one of the 5 family centers. Families identify their loved ones through photographs in accordance with practice that has been in place 20-plus years. May I continue, or?
Yes, please continue.
To clarify that point, 90% of identifications are done by photographs. The remaining are done by such scientific methods as X-ray, fingerprints, and DNA. Once the identifications are done, a small number less than 1% of our families want to see their loved ones' remains while the remains are at the morgue. OCME accommodates them by making arrangements for family members to visit the appropriate facility at no cost to the family. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Maniotis? Mr. Cirillo? And thank you for clarifying. I think that, as you know, that was, questions were raised at our review session on Monday regarding your procedures, so.
Yes,
Mr. Cirillo.
I want to share the thanks that the chair just extended to you for explaining the overall, use the word, services that are provided by the office. Obviously, as I said on Monday, it's a somewhat awkward conversation based on the sensitivity of the issues that are involved. My concern, which I guess I think there was a lot of information in your presentation, and I hope I have it clear. But my concern was, first, that we were denying a borough its own location by the move from the Bronx to Queens and Manhattan, which I believed in these circumstances, based on the information I had believed to be true or assumed, that people under extraordinary circumstances would now need to go potentially from their, as close as they could possibly be in their own community, to another borough. That concern was exacerbated by the fact that the application also reveals that the lease does not include parking. So if many people were arriving to deal with this issue of identification of their loved ones, they wouldn't even be able to park, and so there would be a whole host of issues for them. So let me just make sure I understand one thing so that really the concern that I had would be completely moot. Right now, 90% of identifications made by family members are done by some photographic identification. It isn't an in-person identification.
By in-person, do you mean viewing the
Yes,
decedent
viewing.
directly?
Yes, viewing, personally viewing.
That experience is very traumatic for families, and
Yes.
for 20-some years, starting with Dr. Hirsch, who recently passed, was the chief medical examiner, he changed the procedure. So all identifications by family members are done by digital photographs.
And that can be done in any one of the locations that exist around the city, we'll say around the city for
Yes.
purposes of the question.
Yes, that's correct.
And just to clarify, because you were naming sites and I wasn't able to keep them all,
Okay.
how many of the boroughs, including what will happen here, will have sites in each borough? One is in Staten Island.
One is in Staten Island at the Seaview campus.
Understood.
One is in Queens Hospital campus.
Okay.
One is in Kings County Hospital campus. And one is in Manhattan, the NYU Langone campus.
Okay. So again, there is a reality that residents of the Bronx would need to go to one of the other four boroughs to do even the photographic, electronic identification of potentially a loved one.
So I neglected to mention.
Okay.
I did in my testimony. We currently have, and we have always had, a family services center in the Bronx, currently located at Jacoby. Last year, in June, it was, the co-location was terminated, and the pathology and mortuary functions moved away and went to Queens and Manhattan. The Family Services Center is still in that location at the Jacoby campus,
Okay.
occupying the entire space, which is way too large
Large.
for us.
So that Family Services Center, isn't that what we're shifting
Yes.
now?
Yes,
Right,
that's
so at
correct.
some point, based on the application continuing through the process successfully,
Right.
the Bronx will be without a Family Services Center.
No, they.
Oh, I'm
we-
sorry.
We will maintain the Jacoby Services Center.
Oh, okay.
Until the new office it's a easier, more easily accessible location with a lot of public transportation, which the Jacoby campus, the location we were at, did not have. And it's a more suitable environment for families. So we will not close down our existing family center until we are fully operational in the new location.
In Queens and Manhattan?
In the
Everywhere.
Bronx.
In the Bronx,
Yeah.
okay, then I guess it was a combination of how I was interpreting the report and just you're saying that we'll say the practices changed 20 years ago. The downside to being around longer than that is I remember,
There's a lot of downsides to
There's a
being
lot
around
of-
longer than that.
I remember a different process, having been involved in the Richmond County location back in the late 80s and early 90s. So I didn't realize, as a matter of policy, the way identifications were made, and I just saw potentially as a unfortunate inconvenience at a time where families may obviously need different kinds of services at that time. So I appreciate the information and learning more about this, and thank you for your time and your answering of the questions.
So now I have a question, just to clarify. I think, if I understand this correctly, where you, based on your just colloquy with Mr. Cirillo, in essence, what is currently taking place at Jacoby will just shift, but in other respects, just shift locationally, but in other respects will remain the same. Is that,
That is correct.
okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Maniotis? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Jason Ortiz from DCAS.
Morning. My name is Jason Ortiz, and I am here on behalf of DCAS to speak for the proposed lease for Law Department and OCME at 260 East 161st Street. Do you have any questions at this time?
I'll start. I mean, you heard my questions to Mr. Majoris. Most of them he deferred to you. So I honestly don't understand why 80 people need 40,000 square feet of space, and why, if 198 East 161st Street has only 8,000 square feet of space, it will end up with 60 people, and this location at 260 East 161st Street with 40,000 square feet of space will end up with 80 people. So perhaps you can clarify that.
I think I can clarify a little bit for you. So the rentable square feet on a DCAS measurement is approximately 31,000 square feet. The carpetable square feet, which is literally the carpeting of what's usable, is approximately 24,000 square feet. So on a per square foot basis, it's 246 for each person, based on the 24,000 square feet.
I don't know, 80 into
It's more like
24,000 is 300 feet per square
They're
person.
building it out for 95.
Right, well, it can grow out to 95, but on the 80, 95 would be 246. Sorry.
And the 40,000 square feet is what exactly? If
That's
it's
the
not
landlord
either
measurement.
rentable or,
That's a rentable landlord measurement.
I thought you said the rentable was 31,000 square feet.
So there's two different measurements. There is the landlord measurement, which is subject to market conditions, and there is the DCAS measurement, which is the 31,000 square feet.
And then there's the 24,000.
I'm sorry?
And then you've taken the 31 and made it 24.
Right, so there's the rentable, and then there's a loss factor. So the landlord has a rentable and a loss factor, and then the decast measurement has a rentable and a loss factor.
You're saying there's a 40%?
It's 27, it's approximately 27% on the decast measurement.
What rent are we, what are we basing the rent on? 40,000 square feet?
Yes.
It's a fixed number, so it's a gross amount. Our lease is based on the landlord measurement, so that per square foot basis is on the landlord measurement.
But did your cost calculation take into account the metrics of using the 24 or 31,000 square feet number?
For the purposes of the lease, it's using the landlord measurement.
I mean, leaving everything else aside, it strikes me as an extraordinary loss factor here, where the loss factor in most office space is 20, 25%, to be generous. Here, it's almost 50%. That's quite extraordinary.
Well, the loss factor I've typically seen it as high as 31% on multi-tenanted floors. This is 27%, and right now we're seeing anywhere between 23 and 27% in the market.
27% based on what you consider the rentable, but not what the landlord considers the rentable.
Right, that's correct.
I mean,
So-
isn't, I mean, what DCAS considers the rentable strikes me as essentially irrelevant. It's what the landlord considers the rentable and what DCAS considers the usable.
Well, the dollar amount is fixed, and however you want to partition that amount on a square foot basis is where we have a difference.
You're renting at, I'm sure the dollar amount is fixed as it is in every lease, but that basis for that is what the landlord considers the rentable. And I don't know what you're proposing to pay here, but that is what the basis of the fixed rent is, isn't it?
So, that's right. So on his rent, it's a lower rent. On our rent, it's a higher rent per square foot.
Mr. Reade?
I've never heard of decast rentable square foot. What is that?
Well, it's just a different measurement from what the landlords utilize, and we are having an internal discussion on how best to bridge that gap.
But what's the difference in the calculation? I mean, how do you come up with a rentable?
So we have a separate design and project management team that is assigned to those measurements and how it's calculated. I can't speak to how they define that measurement and calculate it, but I can get more information for you.
Okay, thank you. I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
Mr. Knuckles?
Thank you.
And then Mr. Cantor.
Mr. Ortiz, putting aside the loss factor equation for a moment, my recollection is that this building, for a very long time, has been occupied by almost exclusively city agencies or public service agencies like the Legal Aid Society. So why doesn't the city own this building at this point?
I cannot speak to that. I cannot speak to why the city has chosen to acquire or not acquire different buildings.
Can you confirm that this building is, as I said, it's comprised almost exclusively of city agencies and public service agencies, is that correct?
That is not correct. So the city used to house HRA, which was the majority tenant in the building. They have since moved out. And so the only city agencies occupying the premises are potentially the law department, OCME, and ACS is taking space, approximately 14,000 square feet. The building itself is approximately 250,000 square feet. We are taking less than 20% of that.
So HRA is no longer there?
HRA has moved out.
And do you know who, it is all private tenants in the rest of the building?
At this time, it's private tenants.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cantor.
Thank you. I think it's well known that the floor area, the physical floor area of an office building in the city of New York and the rental square footage from the landlord have nothing in common. Buildings expand and contract depending upon the market. We know that. And then there's the reality of how many people can you get into a particular space physically and logically. Can you tell us, with the numbers that you were using, the 27,000 square feet, was it?
The carpetable is about 24,000 square feet.
Could you tell us, based upon that area versus the quote landlord's area, you have the percentage of, let's use the word usable. How does the usable in this building relate to the average occupancy that DCAS has elsewhere, or that the agencies have elsewhere?
I can say that it's within the market. We are not, this deal is not off the market. So the market
Could
is.
you be more specific?
The market is averaging anywhere between 23 and 27% in a loss factor
For a low-rise building or a high-rise?
for a multi-tenant floor. So it's not necessarily for a high-rise or low-rise. It's, it's building by building, owner by owner, and full floor versus multi-tenant floor.
Well, high-rise gets skewed by the drop-off of elevators, et
The,
cetera.
right, vertical penetrations and, right. We are within the market,
And that's substantiable, right?
correct.
Ms. Efron.
Our report shows that it's the entire third floor, so that wouldn't be a multi-tenant floor. Perhaps you could share with us, after the hearing, how the space was calculated and what standard DCAS is using. I know, I'm sure I'm not alone, that I now feel compelled every time there's a DCAS presentation to find out if it's DCAS rentable versus some other BOMA standard or otherwise. So I think clarification would be really useful, not just for this particular application, but in general, as more will be presented to us, I'm sure, for acquisition of office space. As I asked Mr. Major, would it be possible to find out if ACS is occupying a similar space and what the space utilization is per person there?
I know they are taking approximately 14,000 square feet. I don't know how many employees or staff are allocated to that site, but I can get that information also.
That sounds as if it's prospective, and the description of the property says they're an existing tenant.
I don't know, I don't think they're existing. I think they will be, the lease has been signed, and I think they will be in the space, but I can confirm that.
Great, or any other city tenant that you would have access to the records for, just for us to get a sense of what space utilization in that configuration of space would be.
Okay.
I mean, just to follow up on Ms. Efron's question, just as apparently DCAS has its own rentable per square foot formula, do you have a formula for average amount of office space per employee?
I think it's just a rule of thumb. It's approximately 200 square feet per person.
So even at the most generous interpretation of this is 25% more per employee than DCAS
So
standards.
So based on the carpetable of approximately 24,000 square feet and 246 carpetable square feet per person, it's a little higher. But our mandate at DCAS is to work with the agencies to identify operational efficiencies or deficiencies in their existing space, and in their new space, try to rectify that and provide a better operation for their service. So as part of that, the new office has 2 large conference rooms, for example. It has a reception area for approximately 40 people, a computer room of roughly 100 square feet, a file room for approximately 1,400 square feet, 6 additional conference rooms. So those those amenities or operational advantages are not available to them in their existing space. So as part of the build-out for this space, we needed additional space, which is typically not a high-intensive office use, for conference rooms and storage space. So you'll find that the rentable square foot per person is larger or more generous because of the additional common areas.
We heard from the law department that ultimately this will have 80 employees here, 60 employees at the other location on East 161st Street with only 8,000 square feet. Why the disparity? Can you answer that, or is that a law department issue?
I think, I mean, Ken can touch on this further if he'd like, but I think
Well,
just
we asked him, he deferred it to you.
I think operationally, they're very limited in how they can service their client. And while they can physically fit 60 people, it doesn't mean that they are able to effectively operate. And so this expansion space will provide them that space to operate effectively and efficiently. And I suspect there will be more movement between these two sites because the existing site has so many deficiencies. They don't have the space for the conference rooms. They don't have the storage space. So I think there will be more movement between these sites.
So why wouldn't, since ultimately you think 95 employees would be here, why wouldn't 95 employees be here from the outset?
I'm sorry?
Since you said that the current anticipation is that 80 employees would be here, but you base your average amount per employee based on 95 employees being here, why wouldn't 95 employees be here at the outset, given the overcrowded conditions?
And that may be. I mean, that may ultimately happen.
Can you provide us, do you happen to know what the vacancy rate is in the building?
They are doing a very expansive renovation in the building. I don't know exactly the vacancy rate, but I can find out.
Can you provide us, we had asked on Monday for DCAS to provide us with a stacking plan?
Okay.
Commissioner Cantor.
Let me try it again. I understand you're saying you're in a congested environment now, and when you're moving, you're getting to a more generous environment. Okay, that makes sense to a degree. You have two large conference rooms and 6 smaller conference rooms. What are, in terms of comparatives, let's discuss law firms. Do you have any statistics on the relative floor area ratio to personnel on private law offices, not counting White Shoe?
I do not.
Then how can we know that there's an efficiency here?
I think we have a confidence in the law department that they are using tax dollars effectively. I do not believe that the conference rooms and the additional storage space and some IT area is excessive.
No, I'm not challenging that.
Okay.
I'm not challenging that at all. I'm saying I understand you improving the quality of life for people as they move from where they are to where they're going. But what I don't understand is you're defending the use area, and you don't seem to have any comparables to show us, to tell us.
I do not have any private market comparables for a law department.
And how do we know that, how do we collectively, you as well as the commission, know that the ratios are reasonable?
I believe that the law
For law
department.
firms.
I believe the law department has a fiduciary responsibility to find space that is within their means and acceptable and not excessive. And I do not believe that this space is an exception.
On what basis do you come to that conclusion?
Because I do not believe that the law department has any interest in taking unnecessary space. I do not have any additional data to provide backup for you.
I mean, Mr. Ortiz, I don't want to belabor this at this point, but it does, I mean, with all due respect to the law department's expertise is to represent the city in these matters, tort matters, and a whole variety of issues. Their expertise is as lawyers. Your expertise at DCAS is the fiduciary responsibility of representing the city in terms of what's an appropriate lease and how well it should be negotiated and what is appropriate space. I mean, obviously, there's a collaborative effort between your role and the law department, but fundamentally, it seems to me that this is DCAS's responsibility, not the law department's responsibility.
It's absolutely our responsibility, and we have worked in conjunction with the law department to identify their need and to help design their space in a way that maximizes their efficiency and their operation. And this is the best proposal that we found in terms of location, size, transportation, and a landlord with the wherewithal to accommodate us.
I look forward to seeing the stacking plan, and if you can submit additional information in response to a number of questions that various commissioners asked. Any other questions, commissioners? Thank you, Mr. Ortiz.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this particular matter? Why don't you speak and then sign up, Ms. Lazarson?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Dale Lazarson with DCAS Asset Management and Leasing, and thank you to my colleague, Jason. I just wanted to offer a few points of clarification and also offer that the line of questioning is very thoughtful. I will go back with Jason, and we will absolutely provide in writing what you have requested. A stacking plan, and my apologies, I forgot to prepare that from Monday. My apologies, Jason. With respect to a few things, however, Jason trails me in his tenure at the city and may not be yet acclimated to a few points, that one of which is the city has absolute standards for the per square foot per person for its office spaces. We're getting around to looking how we use industrial sites as well. But for office spaces, there are city standard templates developed by DCAS. And that's very intentional, to be very thoughtful and responsible financially, but also to compete in today's climate, in yesterday's climate, and in the future climate with office space. Toward that, the law department, OCME, many of our city agencies have unique requirements, but there is a common theme amongst all of them. If there is a workstation standard, if there is a private office standard, if there are conference room standards, all of these city standards apply across all agencies. When an agency has a need, we take a look at the head count, not only at immediate occupancy, but growth that's approved. And when we plan office space, we utilize these standards. Now the standards adjust up or down based on unique requirements. One point of clarification in this particular application. The 40,000 square feet by the landlord's measurement is combined. It is all of the third floor and is a portion of the fourth floor. And this is combined for both agencies' needs. So the head count of the law department may start around 80, and as Mr. Majoris indicated, may grow to somewhere in the 90s, but then there's additional head count for OCME in their space. So we will be up over 100 in head count. That square footage is still quite generous. And again, we will return to you in written format a statement about this. Some of OCME's amenities, however, in addition to those that Jason mentioned for the law department, the rather large file room required, the conference rooms, OCME also has large gathering space. This is a very unique requirement, and it is to accommodate the families that come in for the required reasons to meet. If you will, it's not a small space. It's a nice space for them. There are 2 rooms. Additionally, when families are not using the space, These larger spaces for OCME are used for the investigations that may take place for OCME. So this is an example of a little bit of a loss in extremely efficient space because of the needs for the particular operation. Now, there's one other point that I'll touch on, and that is the measurements. We concur 100% with what you said, Commissioner Cantor. A landlord's measurements in New York and elsewhere across the country are always interesting, and they tend to move around. DCAS is evaluating now, and there's been some heavy dialogue, as Mr. Ortiz indicated. DCAS is evaluating how space is measured. The standard in the boroughs is REBNY, not necessarily BOMA, as elsewhere in the country, but is REBNY. At this juncture, DCAS doesn't necessarily subscribe to REBNY. REBNY loss factors, as Jason suggested, can be up there in the numbers. This particular building probably has a REBNY loss factor of somewhere around 21 to, could be as high as 27%, but I think it's maybe in the moderate 20s. The REBNY standards have some interesting influences, and again, DCAS Design and Project Management is evaluating these, and we may have our own standard of measurement when it all settles out. So an explanation of that we can provide to you as a follow-up from the experts who are in fact managing that particular analysis, if you will. But please rest assured that the city's standards apply across all agency for per person. Size of conference rooms, workstation sizes, office spaces, et cetera. And with respect to how, given that right now we're in the midst of a landlord measurement versus a tenant measurement, as you are all very familiar, rent is usually based on $1 per square foot rentable. So how do you calculate? Do you calculate that against the landlord or against the DCAS measurement, right? So right now, with that said, we are approaching this creatively. When we are speaking to our landlords, we're discussing what is their expected annual aggregate revenue. And we're looking at that. So on a DCAS measurement, it may look like it's higher, $1 per square foot. On the landlords, it may look like it's at market. And then we come in and we negotiate and hopefully get, a little bit of an aggressive market deal. The last point I'm going to make is this, is that, as Jason touched on this in some of his last statements, when we have an agency need, particularly in today's climate, we'll be very aggressive in our search. We will look within city properties, both leased and owned for vacancies, and we'll look in the area, the catchment area that's required for the agencies. Space today is very difficult. Supply is limited. So in this particular case, at this particular building, where, as Jason mentioned, we have an owner who's familiar with doing business with the city. He has the wherewithal to do business with the city. He had the space available. Unless we're doing a build-to-suit, we can't always get to the exact square footage required. Sometimes we are leasing a little more space. Sometimes we're leasing less and we're making do by being creative. In situations where we're leasing a little more space, as it may be the case here, the utilization, when it all shakes out, is probably at maximum capacity when the space is planned for both agencies, is probably somewhere around the 220s, maybe as high as the 240s. This may be a little higher than city standard, but again, space availability, how space can be demised, is absolutely a factor that we must consider. Okay?
I will only say this, Ms. Latterson. I'll make 2 points. One, you seem to be conflating the space that's being used by Chief Medical Examiner's office and this space, and I just note that the Chief Medical Examiner's office space is an additional 5,000 square feet. And I don't know if, and this is the first, at least I've heard, that these spaces are to be shared in any way. Is that the case, that these spaces are shared?
The space
or are these
itself-
separate offices?
Yeah, the space itself will be separated. However, it's on the same floor. There is there's a partition wall to separate, but they will be sharing systems and equipment, mechanical infrastructure, et cetera. But no, not the actual square footage. And yes, I stand corrected. It is in addition to.
Thank you. So all of this, how the Chief Medical Examiner's office is going to use the 40,000 square feet They're not. Is that correct? This is only for the law department.
Yes, I stand corrected, yes.
Thank you. The second just point I'd make is that most of these questions that we're asking you today and asking Mr. Ortiz today came up at our review session on Monday, and I would have hoped that DCAS would have been more, especially since you knew exactly what questions we would be asking, that you would be more prepared to answer those questions today. And then the third point I'd make is that your last point about how this is ultimately going to end up and what it's going to be, it seems highly speculative at this point, given the fact that you are before us in a formal process, and that these are the very questions that you would think would be answerable at this point. So I don't know if there are any other questions.
Hi, if I may, Mr. Chair. You know,
Mr. Cantor, and then Ms. Levin.
I once rented office space from a client, and it was 23,000 square feet, and when I came to a renewal, it became 27,000 square feet. This is true, okay? But I didn't really care. What I was concerned about is, how many people can I get into this space? Now, you made a very reassuring presentation in saying that, as virtually every organization does, there are standards within the organization for how many square feet for an office, how many square feet for the executive office, how many square feet for this, how many square feet for that. With that information that you've just described, why can you not indicate to us how this space, usable space, whatever you want to call it, how this space stacks up against other similar space for similar usage in the city of New York? I mean, that's been a pretty basic question that we've been asking, all of us in various forms and shapes. You have the data. You're telling us you have the data.
Yes, yes.
So why can't we?
So, that's a good question. We are going to get back to you in writing with this particular transaction and how this space is being laid out. Right now, what we have on the table is a proposal to lease, as I mentioned, the entire third floor and fourth floor, which the landlord's measuring combined, to Commissioner's point, of approximately 44,000 square feet, with a little over 100 employees. So we will get back to you on what that becomes per person in actuality when we look at all of the standards and whether or not any of those standards had to be adjusted based on some unique influences. We will certainly get back to you in writing.
And the adjustment in those standards, you would also be able to give us the comparables to, let's say, private industry.
I can actually comment to the private industry comparables now. I think we touched upon this a few hearings back when we were discussing the law department's proposed space at a building here in the civic area.
Yeah, I think it was 500
So
square
across,
feet.
yeah, so across the country, law firms, many of you are familiar with this. So law firms have had a historical design layout of a lot of private offices, a lot of file banks, et cetera. Over time, law firm design and planning has incorporated now some more dynamic environmental needs, including, what I call touchdown or plug-and-play space, some open office environments, et cetera. But there appears to be somewhat of a trend shifting back to private spaces. The utilization factor in law firms can become more efficient per person by the use of high-density file rooms as opposed to large file banks. That's a static, opportunity. But for the most part, I have always found law firms across the country to be somewhere per person about 225, swinging up to about 275. Now, this depends upon the law firm, obviously, and the market. It depends upon the conditions. Law firms often have very generous conferencing areas for presentations, et cetera. But I think that a law firm standard across the board, whether it swings up or swings down, the average is probably somewhere around 250 still in today's climate.
Thank you.
That's based on my experience.
Ms. Levin.
And I don't mean to continue this discussion any further than we need to. When you get back to us, you're getting back to us with a robust package of information. Could you please include information about other sites you may have found in the market? You describe your search rationale. Tell us what other sites you found that might have been suitable, if you found other sites, why they were rejected, and how to place this in the context of the office market in the Bronx.
Sure.
Thank you.
Happy to do so.
Is there any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Lazarson. Is there anyone else who wants to be heard on this matter today? In hearing none, the hearing is closed with the expectation that we will get a lot of additional information from DCAS. Thank you.
Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 14, CD1, N160303, PXM. A public hearing in the matter of a notice of intent to acquire office space for use of property located at 55 Chambers Street.
Welcome back, Ms. Lazarson.
Okay. So let's move out of the Bronx and right back here to our home base in Manhattan, Civic Center area. I am here to present and speak in favor of the 195 Notice of Intent to acquire office space, which is in front of you. This is for the acquisition of approximately 15,000 square feet of ground floor space right here, as I mentioned, located in the Civic Center area, at a city-owned building, which is unique, at 280 Broadway, or at the corner of Broadway and Chambers, 280 Broadway, otherwise known as 55 Chambers. This is this building is often referred to as the Marble Palace, also the Sun Building for its prior and original tenant, the Sun newspaper, New York Sun newspaper, or the A.T. Stewart Dry Goods. This was the first department store in downtown Manhattan building. It is a National Historic Building, and it was landmarked by New York City in 1986. The building is also in the African Burial Grounds and Commons District. The 15,000 square feet proposed for the city will be used for expansion space by the Department of Buildings, which headquarters is actually located in this building on floors 3 through 7. The expansion space will primarily serve as a borough-wide customer service center for high-traffic transactions, over-the-counter type of transactions, over-the-counter permits, applications, et cetera. If you're familiar with this building, the lines getting into 280 Broadway right now are quite extensive. Much of this traffic is going to the upper floors in the headquarters space. The intention of this expansion is driven by new funding initiatives and new initiatives, customer service-friendly initiatives for the Department of Buildings. So they will be relocating this particular desk from the upper floors to the ground floor. This will help facilitate a relief on some of the capacity issues in the building, and it will also help facilitate a better flow of traffic from the street. All visitors to the space will enter through the 280 Broadway entrance in the security and exit on Chambers. There will be some additional space then made available in the headquarters space on floors 3 through 7. However, that will be expansion space for the Department of Buildings. And we do have a representative from the Department of Buildings here to talk a little about operations for DOB, Tom Ryan, the Executive Director of Asset Management for DOB. The proposed space was the former Modell's athletic store, which interestingly enough has relocated back to its original space on the corner after it was vacated by Dwayne Reade. The lease proposed will be 20 years with an option, and the city will have a standard termination right. And I'm sorry, this will be a sublease. So this is the interesting nuance here. The city acquired this particular building in the 1960s from a condemnation. Subsequently, in the 90s, for quite a few required renovations, the building was distressed. EDC had some jurisdiction, took it to market, and the renovations and a lease of some of the floors, floor 2, the ground floor retail, a sub-basement area, and the parking garage. Continue briefly.
Very briefly.
The space was leased to the party that provided the improvements and subsequently assigned to a realty company who has tenanted the ground floors. Let me stop there and answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Lazarson? Hearing none, Ms. Lazarson.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Tom Ryan from the Department of Buildings.
Good morning, everyone. One point I'd just like to elaborate on this necessary office expansion. We've been tasked at the Department of Buildings with hiring 330 employees over the next 2 fiscal years, and we've been working very closely with DCAS and trying to secure some space to do that. What makes this expansion so attractive is it's interconnected with our main headquarters at 280 Broadway, and we're looking to create egress and egress in and out of the building, and we could leverage existing current infrastructure such as facilities, security, custodial services, and be able to do this a little bit cheaper. We're looking to move 4 units down there consisting of 100 employees, and we're estimating around 350 customers per day coming in and out of the space. So,
Any questions for Mr. Ryan? Mr. Dweck?
I forgot to ask DCAS earlier. Is there any other office space available in that building?
I don't know, but it's a standalone building.
Okay, because it would have made sense had there been office space to potentially use an upper floor instead of the more expensive retail ground floor. But it could be a benefit if you're serving the public and they're coming in and out, they don't have to go up the elevators. But other than that, there could have been a cost saving, but from what I understand now, there is no other office space, and therefore, this makes the best sense to see it.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Ryan? Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Pardon me, Ms. Efron.
I couldn't see it in the materials.
Almost made it.
Could you, it's an easy one. Could you just tell us where the handicap access is? Is it on Broadway or on Chambers Street?
On Broadway.
Okay, thank you.
Now, any other questions for Mr. Ryan?
Thank you.
You've made it, Mr. Ryan, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this matter? Hearing none, this hearing is closed. Thank you very much.
Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 15 and 16. Calendar number 15, CD 12, C150438ZMM. Calendar number 16, N160164, ZRM. A public hearing in the matter of applications for a zoning map and zoning text amendment concerning the Broadway Sherman Avenue rezoning.
Okay, as is our standard practice, we will give the applicant team 15 minutes to make its comprehensive presentation. Then we will hear from any elected officials who are here, and I believe the Manhattan Borough President, Gail Brewer, is here. Then we will switch to those opposed and go back and forth between those opposed and those in favor. So the applicant team can step up. And can you please identify all of the team?
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Paul Travis. I'm from Acadia Sherman Avenue, LLC.
Oh, okay.
Presenting with me today will be our affordable housing expert, Ron Schulman, our architect, Robert Urich from Kenneth Park Associates, and our environmental consultant, Robert Kulikowski from Langen Engineers. And we'll obviously be happy to take any questions that you have. I'm here to present our I'm here to present our rezoning proposal for the Sherman Plaza site in Inwood, which is the first private mandatory inclusionary housing rezoning application. The subject site is a large 47,000 square foot site on Broadway and Sherman Avenues in Inwood that is currently developed with a largely vacant 2-story structure. Due to the lack of potential development sites in Inwood, the site is one of the few opportunities to build new affordable housing in this blossoming neighborhood. I'm happy to report today that the ULURP process has worked, I would say, exactly as it should for our rezoning proposal. Since our January certification, when you had many questions about the proposal, we have met and worked intensely with Manhattan Community Board 12, Borough President Brewer's office, Councilperson Yodanis Rodriguez's office, and city planning staff, particularly the Manhattan office, to review and then revise our original proposal. While we don't expect that everyone will be happy with the rezoning, this process has, I believe, truly improved the proposal, and we are proud of the work done by everyone here to hopefully produce the first private applicant rezoning with mandatory inclusionary housing. And I think you received today a revised resolution from Community Board 12 Manhattan. So I am here to introduce the project context and describe the process so far. To understand where we ended up, I think it's important to understand our planning process from start to finish. So I want to take everyone quickly back to 2008. That year, Acadia Sherman was ready to move forward with a 307,000 square foot, 17-story, as-of-right mixed-use project, which included a large community facility and approximately 160 market-rate condominium apartments. After the demolition process began on the existing building, the office tenant, which was actually the police department HRA at the time, did not decide to go forward with the lease, which had been approved. The financial markets collapsed and the project did not happen. When we started to think about what to do next, we realized that a large community facility type use was not really in character for the neighborhood, which is predominantly residential. After the mayor was elected, we also saw a real opportunity to build a significant amount of affordable housing with a modest increase in density. It seemed to us this site had all the ingredients for implementing the mayor's housing plan. The site is very large for the neighborhood. It's 47,000 square feet, which is over an acre. It's located on two very wide streets, Broadway and Sherman, and it is close to two subway stations, the one and the A. After taking a deeper look in the neighborhood, we realized that new affordable housing had not been built in a very long time. So we started to work with city planning staff on a rezoning plan for the site, and we also wanted to extend the commercial overlay over the entire site. So our original proposal was for an R9 zoning district with a full C24 overlay. And that's the building that we presented, that you saw, sorry, at the end of January. That building was 374,000 square feet, although the zoning permitted a building of 474,000 square feet, or an FAR of 10. And the building was a 23-story tower, which is about 20% larger than we could have built as of right. Our rationale was that this would place the bulk of the building away from the adjacent buildings and towards the wide streets. We also proposed mandatory inclusionary housing option 2, which is 30% and 80% of AMI, which would have produced approximately 112 units of affordable housing. When we went to Community Board 12, we heard many issues, and I would say there were 4 that were key. Number 1 was the building was too tall and out of character with the neighborhood. Number 2, that affordable housing should include units that are affordable for neighborhood residents, and then third, I'm sorry, there were 3 I would say were key, and then third, that extension of the commercial overlay made sense and would create new economic activity and jobs. After the community board met, we started meeting with the borough president's office and began an intensive process to revise our application to address these concerns. Both city planning staff, the Manhattan office, very much appreciate their help. The borough president's office and the city council land use staff were helpful as we looked at different options in coming to our revised proposal, which is for a R9A, R8X zoning. And this is a rendering of the building. We're obviously very, very early in the design process. I think anyone who knows the buildings we build in the city, this will get better as we move along. The combined zones now allow about 370,000 square feet of development, slightly less than we had proposed as a building, and over 100,000 square foot less than the R9 would have allowed. The R9A, R8X districts, as you know, are both contextual zones, and they have height limits of 17 stories or 175 feet. These zoning districts would actually lower what is now permitted because there is no height limit in the existing zoning. And I would just mention the building we're showing you today is 15 stories, which is the building we're now discussing with the councilperson. We are pursuing MIH option 3, which is the deep affordability option, which would provide 20% of the units at 40% of AMI, obviously much lower than we had originally proposed. However, as Ron Schulman will discuss in more detail, again, the councilperson has been very clear that it is his goal to get 50% of the units to be affordable here. That is our goal, and we are working very closely with HPD and the city council staff to increase the total percentage of affordable housing to 178 of the 355 planned apartments. Well, we understand the revised proposal will not satisfy those that want to see nothing built here. The proposed R9A and R8X zoning districts with a C24 commercial overlay is appropriate and will ensure that much-needed affordable housing is built when this site is redeveloped. The zone imposes a height limit for the first time and requires a contextual building envelope. This will shape the development of this unique large site while preserving existing neighborhood character. Extending the commercial overlay over the entire site will provide exciting new opportunities for local retail shops and small businesses, and we can show you, if you want, how we have split up the ground floor to make sure it's all small commercial spaces. With its size and location on wide streets close to public transit, this site is an ideal place to modestly increase the allowable density in order to build much-needed affordable housing. We think this is a model of how the MIH process should work, and we welcome any of your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Travis. Are you going to have others now speak?
Morning, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair.
And we'll hold our questions until the team is
Commissioners, my name is Ron Schulman. I'm the owner of Best Development Group. We're affordable housing consultants and developers. We've participated in all the housing programs in the city for the last 10 years, and I've been in the business for 30 years. So I'm here to discuss the affordable housing as planned for this site. I want to make sure everyone on the panel knows that this is still a concept level in terms of the exact affordable housing mix, but we don't yet have the detailed floor plans. However, we have started a very good framework with HPD. We've met with HPD and the City Council, and MIH provides a very good framework for this mix of affordable housing. Project was certified into ULURP with MIH option 2, which is 30% of the floor area at 80% of AMI, which is $62,150 for a family of 3. In response to comments received from the community members and elected officials, we've revised the application to the MIH deep affordability option, which is 20% of the floor area at 40% of AMI. 40% of AMI is $31,080 for a family of 3. This is lower than the Community Board 12's 2014 median income, which is $41,513. We understand that additional affordable housing must be built above the deep affordability level, and we're working closely with HPD and the City Council on the right mix of income tiers to get to 50% affordable housing for the site. All affordable housing units on the site will be permanently affordable through an HPD regulatory agreement, which is 30 years, and the MIH is permanent in the zoning. And all residential amenities like a gym and a resident lounge and all amenities are open to all building residents. In terms of the unit mix, we will follow the HPD guidelines, which will require a mix of smaller and family-sized apartments. Accordingly, we anticipate including studios, 1-bedrooms, 2-bedrooms, and 3-bedroom apartments in the building according to the HPD program mix. And we'll be happy to answer any questions after the rest of the presenters.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Robert Urick. I'm from Kenneth Park. We're the architects on the project, and I'm here to speak briefly about the differences between the existing R72 zoning district and the revised R9A, R8X proposal, some of the points that Paul Travis had already touched on. The existing R72 zoning has been in place in this neighborhood since 1961, and many of the existing buildings, including the current 2-story garage, predate the zoning. The majority of the surrounding residential buildings are high lot coverage, 5 to 6-story buildings on small sites that actually exceed the maximum allowable FAR in an R72. The R72 district typically produces 14 to 16-story buildings with low lot coverage that are set back from the street. Because there is no height limit in the R72 district, it can produce higher buildings on larger sites. The building planned in 2007 was a 17-story building that we have up on the board here. The revised massing, the revised proposal for an R9A, R8X zoning district more carefully shapes the allowable floor area massing, and the scale of the development on this site. Under the R9A, R8X, the allowable floor area is decreased by over 100,000 square feet from the original R9 proposal. The R9A, R8X zoning places a height limit of 175 feet or 7 stories on the site for the first time. There is no height limitation on the current zoning. The revised zoning proposal is for a contextual zone with mandatory quality housing. The existing zoning is not contextual. Extension of the commercial overlay will allow for the entire ground floor, with the exception of a single residential lobby, to be commercial and community facility space. The massing that you see in front is illustrative and an example of what we are going to be proposing, which is a 15-story, 155-foot tall building with parking at the cellar, with ground floor, commercial, and community facility space. Floors 2 through 15 will be residential. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Weisbrod, Vice Chairman Knuckles, Commissioners. My name is Robert Kulikowski, and I'm with Langen Engineering. And we are the environmental consultant that performed the environmental review thus far. Prior to Langen, I spent nearly 12 years as Director of the Mayor's Office of Environmental Coordination, overseeing reviews on behalf of the Mayor and responsible for updating the secret technical manual, among other things. I'm here to speak about the environmental review that was conducted. We are currently in the process of finalizing the environmental review for the revised application. However, speaking briefly about the original environmental review provides good context because during that environmental review, we analyzed a building that was larger in every respect to what could be built under the revised application. As you know, a seeker review examines the incremental differences between the no action and the with action conditions. The size of this difference determines, according to guidance in the technical manual and the rules, the significance of any effects. Typically, with rezoning projects, the no action condition is the existing condition, and the with action condition is the proposed zoning and what could be fully built out according to the zoning, and that's what's analyzed. This maximizes any incremental difference. In certain situations, the proposed project is less than what could be built under the proposed zoning, as is the case here. They're proposing a 155-foot building, whereas the proposed new zoning would allow a building up to 175 feet. However, the analysis framework still uses the proposed zoning to maximize the effects. We want to, under the seeker environmental review, we want to maximize the incremental difference. So that means we want to get as small a no action condition as possible and maximize under the proposed zoning what could be built under the with action condition.
15 minutes.
Very quickly, Mr. Kulikowski.
Okay, we're now in the process of finalizing the screening analysis for the revised application, which produces a smaller building and 10 stories lower than the original reasonable worst case was determined to be. Preliminary evidence shows that because of the smaller building, the effects compared to the no action condition will be even less. And we've looked at shadows at this point, and we've looked at some visual corridors, which we will be sharing with the department as the environmental review progresses.
Thank you very much. That concludes the presentation of the applicant team and open to questions. Ms. Deluz.
First, thank you for the presentation, and I guess I want to commend the development team for listening to the community and coming back with a revised proposal. I guess my question is for Mr. Schulman primarily, or my questions. I just want to I know it's still conceptual, I know you're in discussions with HPD, but I wanted to maybe tease out something you said or make sure I heard it correctly. Are you saying that the development team is committing that the full 50% of the units that would be affordable would be permanently affordable, though MIH would only make 20% permanently affordable?
I think the MIH is the permanently affordable, but any financing with HPD has a regulatory agreement, and the regulatory term is generally 30 years. So if you have permanently affordable under MIH, that's permanent. If you have financed units under a regulatory agreement, it's 30 years, or under any other agreement with HPD.
Okay, so 20% would be permanently affordable and 30% would be affordable for the term of the regulatory agreement.
It could be even, yeah, it
I think
depends
it's 50 or 60, depending on the current financing.
Correct.
Okay, I think that would be interesting to hear from the community what understanding they have. And then the Community Board 12 with the revised a resolution that we just received this morning, it seems that their understanding, and perhaps it's based on conversations that they've had with you, I'm not sure, they seem to indicate that their understanding is that the affordability levels are between 40 and 80% of AMI. So my question is, in the conversations that you've been having with HPD, are you really looking at the financing programs that would produce units within those AMI bands?
Yeah, I think it's comfortable to be said that the 40% and up to 60% would be the low-income units under mandatory inclusionary. There could be income averaging that goes to 80%. HPD and HDC offer a wide array of affordability where you can go to 130% and even higher. So I think there's going to be a stepped affordability levels in the building, but there will be a very significant low-income component in that 40, 50, 60%.
But it's possible that the project may have units above 80% of AMI.
Go ahead.
Yes, sorry, if I can address that. So, as I think you may be aware, so to get to 80% within the HPD
It's on the average.
financing models, you actually have some units at higher AMI. So we are confident by the time we're done, the average of those units will be within the 80%.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. And do you have any idea what the timing might be of conclusion of your conversations with HPD? And whether or not it might be within the time that we have to vote?
Sure, I would certainly hope so. It will obviously be no later than the council vote, but we are hoping we can conclude before your vote.
Thank you.
Ms. Efron, then Ms. Levin. Ms. Levin, and then Ms. Efron.
Actually, I have sort of two unrelated development questions. I think they're probably for Mr. Travis. One is what your thoughts are about what's going into the community facility space.
Okay.
And the other is what assurances you can provide that the building that will really get built is within the 158 feet height limit that you're showing us. You're asking us, under the revised proposal, to put in place a 175-foot height limit, and we're only doing a rezoning here, so we really don't have a whole lot of control over that. But I expect in other aspects of this project, you'll be able to assure us, as the community board seeks to be assured that the height limit you're showing us here will really be realized.
And I should mention that our counsel, Stephen Sinacori from ACME is here, so hopefully he'll make sure I say it the right way. Just in terms of that, as you know, we will be going on to the city council next, and we expect we will be working with the city council to provide some measure of assurance with them in whatever way they decide the right mechanism is, that the building will ultimately be the 15 stories that we're showing. And I can certainly give you my personal assurance that we will build a 15-story building here, although I understand, as the community board has pointed out, when they look at it, they have to look at it in the context of the 17 stories. In terms of the community facility use, I think we have heard a number of comments in the last few weeks about the need for additional space for cultural uses in the neighborhood, and that will be the focus of that space.
Interesting. You might also hear from some of us
Yes.
about additional need for daycare centers.
Correct.
I don't know if that's in your
We're-
mix as well.
We're very
but
aware of that.
We see that citywide.
Yes. And certainly in the Inwood neighborhood, that's very true.
Right, and to encourage partnering with ACS, which is also on the hunt for space.
Ms. Efron.
Commissioner Levin addressed my primary question, which was about the facility space. I just didn't see confirmation anywhere that it remains at 15,000 square feet in the new configuration, so.
Do we have a ground floor plan? I apologize if that didn't happen, but I think we have a ground floor plan that shows it.
And I was going to put in a plug for childcare, so thank you.
Right. Right. And again, I would just caution this is somewhat illustrative. Obviously, the building plans are still very early, but that's generally our thought of the layout of the space. We've heard a lot in the neighborhood about the need for space for local retailers. Most of the retail space in this neighborhood is really the ground floor of an apartment building, so it's very limited space. So part of the goal here is to really provide space for a number of local tenants.
Thanks.
Mr. Knuckles.
Mr. Travis, you may have noted in the latest proposal from the Community Board,
Yes.
they talked about the possibility of a lower building based on a greater percentage of lot coverage. What is your response to that, and what impact would that have on your current design?
I guess the first issue is it would be highly inefficient. As you know, it is quite a challenge to do this type of mixed-income housing in a neighborhood that's just beginning to have a robust private housing market. So one of our goals here is to make this building as efficient as possible. This, we think, is still a reasonably efficient floor plate. If you were to fill up the site, it actually is a much less efficient floor plate. I would also say that while I understand the thought behind that would have a significant impact on the apartment buildings that are immediately adjacent to this site, to eliminate the rear yard, which I think is the only way to do what they're talking about. And again, that was historically what was built in Inwood, but I think in 1961 the commission moved away from having those type of apartment buildings in the city.
Thank you.
Ms. Ms. Ortiz, and then we'll come back to Ms. Della.
Hi. A question about the retail space. I see you've divided the space. Is that your intent, or would you consider larger tenants? I know that was one of the concerns that the borough president raised.
Right, it is our intent to do these small retail spaces. So we do not intend to rent to larger tenants. And we know that's a major concern in the neighborhood, certainly.
And could you sort of speak to the rationale behind the expansion of the commercial overlay? So I'm not sure I understand the logic that presumes that the space will be local because you've expanded it to Broadway. And if you
So I actually not sure I understand how the commercial overlay ended up working here the way it does in the current zoning. So there's a commercial overlay on Sherman, but the major commercial street is really Broadway. So I'm assuming that's some accident of history. We think, certainly you could say maybe it makes sense to eliminate the overlay on Sherman because it really is mostly not a commercial street. But again, I think one of the first things we heard, both from the local council person and from Community Board 12, was they actually thought having more local retail on the site was very important. So we were really responding to their very early comments about the site.
but there are no restrictions that would limit you to that space or that size.
I presume, again, I'll be very careful, I presume by the time we get done with the city council, there will be some type of restriction on that space.
Thank you.
Ms. Delauss.
Ms. Ortiz asked most of my questions. I guess I would just ask if, it seems that the partitions, at least on the Sherman Avenue commercial space, are about even for most of the retail spaces. Can you just maybe, what's an illustrative size of those spaces? If you know.
Yeah, about 2,200 square feet. I think actually, in reality, some will be smaller because there's still a lot of local retailers that I would say 1,500 square feet is a better amount of space, and some will be a little more larger. So this is sort of just an average layout.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant team?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is the distinguished Borough President of the Borough of Manhattan, Gail Brewer. Welcome, Madam Borough President.
Thank you very much, the distinguished chair of the City Planning Commission.
Not as distinguished as the Borough President.
No, we can go on and on about this. Thank you very much. It is an honor to be here today, and I want to thank the Chair Weisbrod and the commissioners. I am Gail Brewer. I am the Manhattan Borough President, and I'm here to speak about the proposed zoning map amendments and the mandatory inclusionary housing text amendment associated with what you just heard, 4650 Broadway in Manhattan and the Inwood community. And I think you all know me well enough that if I had my best wishes, this building would stay just like it is. The chair knows that. But we are situated, as you heard from the developer, that an as of right would be a very tall building. So working with my great staff, whom you know, Lucien Reynolds is here. We all know Basha Gerhardt and Jim Karras, and they have been working with the developer. I want to say one thing about this developer. All of you know me, I'm not crazy about developers. I say that. This one does not have a lobbyist. Very important. Good thing. So, in the original proposal, we saw a nightmare scenario where a developer could construct a building that stood between 240 and 280 feet from the ground, 23 stories and 27 stories, respectively. This would have been made possible by changing the existing R72 zoning to an R9. When the community compared this proposal to the as-of-right scenario, they were rightfully concerned with what such a tower would mean for a community with such strong context, the Great Inwood. The former Packard dealership is a very large site, as we know, and the truth is that a development site this big is dangerous to the community context, whether it is zoned R72 or R9. Before the market crashed, there was a proposal, as we know, to build a 17th tower as of right with zero affordable housing. It's for this reason that we support a contextual rezoning, which will contain a height cap, as you heard earlier. This is what is now in the developer's revised application, and a height cap means that there is no building scenario where a building exceeds a height of 175 feet or 17 stories, and as you heard in response to Commissioner Levin's question, 15 stories is what we understand. In the revised proposal, the developer has committed to a building where 50% of the units are affordable and 20% of the units are affordable at 40% AMI, and you heard those numbers earlier. I would just like to add in response to the question about the HPD negotiations and having been through the many hours in the west side of Manhattan about the 30 years and the discussion about the restriction, we'd like to make that 30% permanent, working with HPD, and that to be part of a similar situation with mandatory inclusionary housing, which is permanent. So that 30%, that's HPD's responsibility to make it permanent. The expanded commercial overlay of the development will allow great neighborhood businesses to lease new affordable commercial space to serve community needs. What's more, the applicant has told us that the building is expected, as we know, to be as low as 15 stories. In light of the revised proposal, the choice is clear when compared to the as-of-right scenario. With an R72, you get a 17-story building, limited commercial that isn't geared towards small businesses, and 100% luxury housing, not one unit of affordable. So I applaud the applicant for responding to community concerns. I applaud the council member, Community Board 12 in particular. And I urge them to continue striving towards this 50% permanently affordable And I also want to congratulate Councilmember Udanis Rodriguez for pulling this all together for a community meeting on Monday night with hundreds of people attending, many of whom are here today, to talk about their concerns as community members and what they would like to see. And I also think that the council member did state that what he would like, and I do concur, is a space for the arts, which I know came up earlier. So that's, this is the first MI8, so it's really important that it be done correctly. And I just want to thank everybody who has had input into the process. It has been a very transparent process, a lot of discussions. Again, I love the current building. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to take this opportunity to not only thank you and your office for your constructive role here, but also to note that thanks to you and the work of your office, we're here discussing MIH as a reality, and that wouldn't be true were it not for your efforts in assuring that MIH became a reality. So thank you.
Well, thank you to everybody. Thank you very much.
Questions? Any questions for Borough President?
I saw him, he went to the bathroom. So.
Thank you very much. Oh, a question from Ms. Ortiz.
Thank you.
Hi. Hi, Borough President. I know that, you know, one of the concerns you raised is about local retail, and, you know, I certainly understand the desire for a smaller retail space. You know, one of the things I noticed in looking at the design is that the space itself is really very deep, 100 feet deep. And, you know, the spaces as designed are 20 by 100, which is really too deep for a retailer. They'd prefer something like 50 feet, you know, 50 by 20. You know, and so that back area is often better for a larger retailer. You know, how, if they're...
Grocery stores.
What?
Grocery stores are fine, chain stores are not.
Okay, so it's less about the size of the retailer per se than the use or the local nature.
Yes, I mean, I think we don't want 7-Eleven. I could go through a long list of what we don't want, in my opinion. I mean, I think that the issue is this would be very exciting if you had a mixture of when we say local, meaning affordable, we always need a grocery store, you know, thinking about what the neighborhood needs and not the big box that pays the really high rent. So I hope that this developer understands that and could come up with something that was both respectful of the neighborhood and not a big box store with, you know, no streetscape and something that you could find in Minnesota, Indiana, or wherever the hell those states are.
So that's encouraging. I just say that because, you know, I wouldn't want to hamstring any design that would make for really poor spaces.
I understand that, but I still maintain that you want something that's representative and makes sense for the community. And I think local retailers could think of how to use that space. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other any other questions for the Borough President? Okay, thank you very much. We're now going to switch to, we'll have 5 speakers in opposition and switch to 5 speakers in support, and then back and forth until all those signed up have had a chance to speak. So the first speaker is Jeff Baumel, is that correct? From the Fort Tryon Park Trust. Welcome, Mr. Baumel.
Thank you. Chairman, Vice Chairman, Commissioners, thank you very much. My name is Jeff Baumel. I grew up in Washington Heights, and Fort Tryon was my backyard. Today I'm here as the Chairman of the Fort Tryon Park Trust and wish to present the Trust's objection to the Sherman Plaza project in its current configuration. Our council has previously written the chair setting out those objections and our position that city planning's failure to require a full environmental impact statement for the project is disconcerting. I recognize that the proposed building has been reduced in size, but the objections set out in our council's letter remain valid, and I ask the commission to include the letter as part of the record in this matter. The trust's principal concerns are, first, that the building, even at 15 stories, will have an unacceptable visual impact on Fort Tryon Park. And second, that the approval of the project without doing a proper environmental impact statement sets dangerous precedents that will end up lining the avenues opposite our park with an unbroken line of high-rise buildings, sharply intruding on the natural features and fabric of the park, which are essential to its use and enjoyment by the public. It's for that reason that the trust filed the Article 78 petition. Regarding the visual impact, the simulations developed by Saratoga Associates that were included with our council's letter show how extraordinarily intrusive the project would be on some of the most important features of the park, including the Dugan Lawn, the Linden Terrace overlook, the trails on the eastern slope of the park, and even the cloisters itself. These adverse impacts would be avoided if the current zoning was retained and the 10-story as-of-right building described in the environmental assessment statement was constructed instead. Such a building would be far more consistent with the 5 to 7-story structures that largely define the surrounding neighborhood today. The Sherman project as proposed would stick out like a sore thumb to the hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers and visitors who use and enjoy Fort Tryon Park every year, many of them virtually on a daily basis. We're talking about a national treasure designed by the Olmsteds for the people of New York. Quite simply, this is the wrong project in the wrong place. We do not question the need for additional housing for New Yorkers, but to respond to this by permitting an oversized tower immediately across from a park that is one of the jewels of the city system, the enjoyment of which rests on maintaining its natural fabric and its natural setting for many generations to come, would not only be bad policy, it would reflect an indifference to our heritage of parks and the respite they provide city residents that would be deeply disturbing. The Fort Tryon Park Trust provides hundreds of programs for all members of the Washington Heights and Inwood community who seek a refuge in Fort Tryon Park. We want to ensure the future generations of New Yorkers will be able to enjoy the same privileges of a safe haven in the park. We can, 2 more lines.
2 more lines you can have.
We can live with 10 stories. Anything above that would have a profound negative impact on the community. We feel strongly that a proper environmental impact statement will support our view. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baumel. We did get your letter today, and it is literally as you speak. It's being distributed to the commissioners and will be part of the permanent record.
Okay, thank you.
So, questions for Mr. Baumel?
It's all good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baumel. The next speaker is David Tom. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Tom.
Tom.
Sorry. My name is David Tom. I am an Inwood resident. I'm a member of Park Terrace North Block Association, Inwood Owners Coalition, and Inwood Preservation. I'm testifying today to urge the Commission to vote no to the requested zoning map change for 4650 Broadway. The original application, the amended application, and the various public meetings led by elected officials and their appointees have been artfully constructed to downplay the true nature of the request. In technical language, it's described as a zoning map change from R7-2 with a partial C2-4 overlay to an R9A, R8X split with a full C2-4 overlay. In real terms, this is a spot zoning request for a building twice the density of anything within miles. Various numbers have been cherry-picked to try and make this change seem less radical and extreme than it is. There is no hiding the fact that the current zoning allows for a residential floor area ratio of no more than 3.44, while the revised application will result in a residential FAR of 7.81, an increase in building bulk of 227%. Never mind the sleight of hand with regard to number of stories or comparison to unrealistic phantom R7 configurations, distorted to try to puff them up against all real evidence to the contrary. Asking to double the residential density is asking to double the residential density, period. And the commercial bulk, in the meantime, goes from about 50,000 square feet at 100-foot deep to over 90,000 square feet at 200-foot deep, enabling, say, a big box commercial taxpayer development should the mixed-use tower scheme not go forward. This is an outrageous increase of residential and commercial density unprecedented in northern Manhattan. I've submitted with my written testimony a zoning map highlighting Manhattan's high-density R8, R9, and R10 zoning districts. Note that these are true districts, not individual lots, organized in a rational manner, and that they are all south of the George Washington Bridge. It is unbelievable that a request to so drastically upzone a single individual lot in an already fully built-out residential area is even being seriously considered. 17 or even 15-story building under the existing zoning on this lot would have been a highly unlikely case because it would have required either an unrealistically skinny tower or, as you saw earlier, incorporating a very large community facility in order to reach such heights. The developer's own EAS used a much more realistic example of a 10-story mixed-use building as an existing condition outcome. What this application does with its contextual high-density zoning is all but ensure a building of 150 to 175-foot height with vastly greater bulk than previously allowed. If this sort of spot rezoning is approved, it will set a precedent for discarding a century of urban planning principles by making all current zoning irrelevant. A large number of soft sites in the neighborhood will be at risk for future individual upzonings. You must do the right thing as planners and reject this dangerous ULURP application. The existing zoning has worked for Inwood for its established residential areas for many decades, and it should remain in place for 4650 Broadway.
Thank you, Mr. Tom. Questions for Mr. Tom? Thank you very much. The next speaker is Nancy Preston.
Hello, Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Nancy Preston, and I am for Moving Forward Unidos, Quality of Life Advocacy Group in Inwood. Moving Forward Unidos opposes the application to rezone 4650 Broadway. Upzoning is out of context in this neighborhood of 6-story buildings. The closest, as you heard, from the last map, the closest R9A, R8X zoning is 6 miles away down at 96th Street. We ask why the rush to rezone a single lot. Rezoning should be done with care, with a wide view towards the entire neighborhood development. Yet here we have a rushed proposal for an individual application with an incomplete and inadequate EAS. 6 of the lines on the EAS have no entry. 3 of the lines we dispute the entry. And 9 of the 19 impact categories we also refute what they wrote. For example, the direct business displacement is a lie. It checks no. There is a garage, a vital garage right there that houses 400 cars and business cars that fills to capacity. That is a direct displacement. There is also a note that there will be no more than 20 children age 6, no more than 50 elementary middle school students, and no more than 150 school students checked in the EAS. Now, this is unrealistic. Additional density will only amplify concerns about our ground toxins, the antiquated water and gas infrastructure, and the power grid that are all downplayed in the EAS. We request a full environmental impact study. We appreciate that the applicant's been negotiating with Manhattan Borough President and our council member. However, as you've heard, the original 2007 application was a 17-story thin tower on a large base. It was approved but never built. The 2016 application was first 27 stories, then negotiated to 23, then to 17, and now to 15. But the residential zoning density is double the 2007 proposal, and there's nearly a full lot girth and bulk of the building. Yes, there is MIH, but many questions remain on those details, as you've heard, and the actual benefits to the community. We have been told that all 50%, you've heard this, will be permanently affordable, and of course we want to make sure that that happens. This is a groundbreaking case, and many are watching. 4650 is not the location for a massive bulky building, twice the density of its neighbors. We ask that the zoning changes be denied. The existing zoning would be more favorable to a building we could support, such as a 10-story medium-density building that would restore the Packard facade, and you've heard this before too, and we hate to lose that. So we hope you will consider the consequences of upzoning in Inwood and agree the cost is just too high in this location. Please reject that application before you. Thank you.
Your timing was very good, Ms. Preston. Just a question. Have you submitted your written testimony?
Yes, I did.
Okay, good.
Yes.
It will be
And you
distributed.
should have that, yeah?
Okay, thank you very much.
Very good, thank you.
Questions, Ms. Preston?
Okay. No?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The next speaker is Rita Gorman.
Hello, my name is Rita Gorman, and I'm with Northern Manhattan Not for Sale. We oppose the current project in the way it's designed. It's my understanding that even with these changes, there'll be a substantial contribution to density, population density in the neighborhood. Not only would this new zoning violate the current character of the surrounding neighborhood, but it would place strain on an already overtaxed, antiquated, subsurface infrastructure that can barely support its current load. Generally speaking, the normal lifespan for infrastructure, I've been told, is 60 years. Against this backdrop, let's take a look at Northern Manhattan's underground infrastructure. Gas mains are 150 to 180 years old. Our electrical distribution cables are 80 to 90 years old. Electrical transmission lines are 80 to 90 years old on average. The only exception to this is the newer M29 transmission line. Electrical transformers are 100 to 150 years old. Water mains are 70 to 150 years old. Sewer mains and catch basins are all dangerously past their lifespans. Now, I'm not an engineer, I'm not technical, but I'm going to give you the source for all of this. This profile was developed during a Public Service Commission court procedure when Con Ed engineers testified under oath about the conditions of the Washington Heights Inwood electrical and gas networks. The Con Ed engineers acknowledged that blackouts, brownouts, low-voltage conditions in our community are all due to an antiquated electrical distribution system that still exists today. In summary, our current infrastructure cannot support the population density we already have, but let alone a significant increase. We understand that CB12 has conditionally approved the Sherman Creek project. I think that's the information you're just getting this morning, subject to certain conditions that we are currently trying to digest. We also understand that a lawsuit, or the petition that the other gentleman referred to, has been filed. We recommend that this project be denied approval at this time until there's resolution of the pending petition and whether or not the developers can even meet the recommendations it's receiving from Community Board 12. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gorman. Questions for Ms. Gorman? Thank you very much. Next speaker is Martin Baker from SEIU 32BJ.
My name's actually Suzanne Kahn. Martin, I work for 32BJ. Martin had...
You definitely don't look like Martin Baker.
Sorry. Martin got called away on a family emergency, so I'm just going to read his testimony into the record. So 32BJ is the largest property service union representing 145,000 building service workers nationwide. 32BJ members maintain, clean, and provide security in schools, offices, and market rate and affordable residential buildings all across the 5 boroughs, including buildings like the proposed one at 4650 Broadway. I'm here today to talk about how important it is that Acadia Realty commit to creating high-quality jobs at their residential developments, along with any commitments that they make to affordable housing. 32BJ has made sure that building service jobs can be good quality jobs, jobs that pay wages that allow people to afford to put a roof over their head, save for retirement, and access health benefits. Over 70,000 building service workers across New York City benefit from these kinds of jobs, but other workers in the city doing the exact same kind of work make only $12 an hour, some as low as $10 an hour, and many receive no benefits. Some of these workers who report earning only $12 an hour are at Acadia's other new residential building in New York City, 70 Fleet, at the City Point development. 200 of the apartments at 70 Fleet, which is 80% of the building, are affordable, which is great, But at $12 an hour, the building service workers in the Acadia building could only afford 21 of those affordable units. My union understands the need for affordable housing. As housing prices have risen across the city, my union brothers and sisters have struggled to stay in their homes, even with their good wages. But we know we cannot build our way out of the city's affordable housing crisis. As long as there are hardworking people earning too little to afford the rising housing costs, families are going to continue getting priced out of their homes. We need to make sure that as new developments are constructed, the building service jobs they create are high-quality jobs. We need developers like Acadia to do their part. Inwood residents need both affordable housing and high-quality jobs, and Acadia can make its project at 4650 Broadway provide both, but the project should not move forward unless they promise to do so. The City Planning Commission should ensure that city resources intended to help working people by creating more housing options are not also underwriting poverty wages, but instead are creating the kind of jobs that New Yorkers desperately need.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you very much. We will now switch back and have 5 speakers in support, starting with Sean Wills.
Good afternoon, Chairman Westbroad and Vice Chairman Knuckles and members of the New York City Planning Commission. I'm here to submit a testimony for Jolie Milstein, the President and CEO of the New York State Association for Affordable Housing, who could not be here today. So in her words, I am pleased to submit testimony in support of this, which represents the first private zoning change before the city under the historic mandatory inclusionary housing program. The mandatory inclusionary housing program, with the support of numerous stakeholders, including the New York State Association for Affordable Housing, is critical to providing much-needed affordable housing for the many New Yorkers with limited incomes. Now that the policy is being translated into practice, this project is a great example of how changes in zoning can translate into affordable housing construction where there might not have been any at all. A major tenet of this proposal was flexibility in the affordability options available for developers and policymakers to ensure that projects are both financially feasible and meet the needs of the city's diverse communities. I am pleased that this first private application under MIH exemplifies this commitment made by the mayor, the Departments of City Planning and Housing Preservation and Development, the City Council, and stakeholders. Working with policymakers, the applicant will include deeper levels of affordability than originally proposed. The applicant has agreed to set aside 20% of the newly created units for those making on average 40% of the area median income. This revision shows that the mechanisms put in place under MIH truly allows for developers and elected officials to work together to best select an affordability option that fulfills the local community's affordable housing needs. Thank you for the Commission's consideration of my comments. As the city transitions from the planning stages of MIH into implementation, we look forward to working with you and other city officials to provide affordable housing options for New Yorkers. Sincerely, Jolie Milstein, President and CEO of the New York State Association for Affordable Housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wills. You will, if you haven't already, submit that.
Yes, I will hand around copies.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Wills? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is it Chris Weidel?
Close enough.
I'm sorry?
Close enough.
Well, why don't you tell me exactly? So Weidel? Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Chairman Weisbrod and members of the commission. My name is Chris Weidello, and I'm the Associate State Director for AARP New York. On behalf of our 750,000 members age 50 and older in New York City, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today and testify. It wasn't very long ago that AARP appeared before the City Planning Commission to testify in support of mandatory inclusionary housing. Today, the CPC's hearing testimony on one of the first applications to build affordable housing under MIH in the city. As you know, many older New Yorkers are living on fixed incomes, as are many younger folks. People are having trouble paying their rent. We commissioned a survey of New York City voters aged 50 and older that showed affordable housing is a major concern for those that responded. In fact, 54% of respondents, far passing any other community concerns, identified housing as their key concern. In communities of color, this number is even higher. For instance, 67% of Hispanic voters 50 and older that were surveyed identified housing as a major concern. There is an affordable housing crisis here in New York City, and far too many New Yorkers are struggling to make ends meet because housing is simply unaffordable. We believe that MIH is one of the most powerful tools to ensure the creation of permanent, affordable housing that will allow New Yorkers to live and age in their neighborhoods and communities where they want to be. This project at 4650 Broadway represents progress in making affordable housing a reality in an area that has not seen any affordable housing development in decades. Furthermore, it incorporates the deep affordability option, which mandates that 20% of units are created at 40% of AMI to better address the economic needs of that community. In closing, I just want to say thank you, Chairman Weisbrod, and members of the City Planning Commission. I thank you for the opportunity to speak today on this proposal, and hope that it is approved so we can start moving forward in the creation of affordable housing in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weidel. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is it Shalia Martin or Sheila Martin? Sheila Martin.
Good afternoon. This is actually my first time here in the 30 years I've been practicing. Anyway,
Welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm here on behalf of the Housing Partnership Development Corp., which is New York City's primary intermediary for affordable housing. We've done over 50,000 units of housing in the 30 years that I've been there, and probably some more before that. I'm here to express our general support of the application to rezone, finally putting the mandatory inclusionary housing policy into practice. We believe that, obviously, that it's a good thing to provide as much affordable housing throughout the city as possible, and this is just the first test. It has to start somewhere. Inwood, in particular, has had one project that we were involved with that provided some affordable housing, but it was a very small project, and it obviously needs more. The neighborhood has a great need for additional apartments for families of all sizes and income levels, and there are very few infill sites available. We support Sherman Plaza Project's amended application, which has been particularly responsive to community input. This site is in a prime location for housing at the corner of Broadway and Sherman. It is located on 2 wide streets, has very easy access to public transit, and is in walking distance from community facilities, shopping, and schools with excess capacity. As part of the revised application, Sherman Plaza would provide a significant amount of affordable housing at very low and as well as middle income levels that will exceed the requirements of the MIH program. This housing program is being developed in partnership with the city and incorporating community feedback. In addition to affordable housing, the project supports community and citywide objectives to encourage new and growing small businesses. There will be about 40,000 square feet of commercial space designed to accommodate the footprint of local businesses and liven a street frontage that is currently deadened by a parking garage. For the foregoing reasons, the Housing Partnership supports Arcadia Sherman Avenue's application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Questions for Ms. Martin? Ms. Delos.
Sheila, first, welcome. It's hard to believe that this is your first time, given the
Yes,
length
it
of time
is.
you've been
We usually
working.
bake a cake for first-time speakers, but
And this is quite an interesting.
So I'm just wondering, has the Housing Partnership worked with Acadia in the past?
No, I
No,
don't.
okay, I
believe
didn't
we
know if there
has.
was a
But
relationship to
there's we not as an organization, but there personal relationships, people on the staff.
Okay.
And we know Ron, we've worked with Ron.
Okay, thank you for being here.
Any, thank you, Ms. Martin. You escaped. The next speaker is Shahabuddin Ali, but speaking on his behalf. Oh,
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon to the commissioners. And just before I begin, I will let you know that this is my first time as well testifying, and I did not bring a cake, but I
it's
will
up
make...
to us to bring the cake, not up to you.
Oh, well,
but,
then where's the cake?
Anyway.
In that case, I'll have a slice. So my name is Shah Ali. I am the chairman of Manhattan Community Board 12, which covers Washington Heights and Inwood, where this project is being proposed. I believe the commission has a copy of our resolution that was passed last night, signed this morning. And if you do not have a copy of the March 22 resolution that was passed earlier this year, we'll make sure that the commission has it. But I'm seeing yes, you have it. Okay. So, and also, I believe I began by saying I don't have a cake, but I also will tell you that I am not a city planner, I'm not an architect, I'm an attorney by trade, so if there are these R7, R9s, I am taking my lead from the men and women who serve the community board with expertise, and I get a briefing on a daily basis from them. So I thank them for their expertise. So any sort of bit of knowledge I have on this comes from the folks who actually do the hard work at our board. So the documents speak for themselves. Our initial March resolution opposed the ULIP application as it was presented to us, and our resolution of last night, signed this morning, does not offer an objection. I'd like to take a brief moment to discuss the process, because I'm very proud of the process Community Board 12 went through. When the ULIP application was proposed, we had our public hearing, which was attended by over 200 residents in the community, many of which, if not all, are in the audience today. And the board, hearing from the community, rendered its decision via resolution. And it was with, I believe, full community participation. That is what our board does. We do not limit community participation. When the revised application was submitted, a town hall meeting was held rather quickly. From the time the application was submitted to the time the town hall was held, less than 24 hours in working time. That town hall was again attended by over 100 residents, given ample opportunity to speak. This time around, I contracted with a court reporter to make sure we had accurate minutes so that we know exactly what the community wanted. Last night, during our general meeting, we took under new business a resolution which you have before you so that our position is on record with this commission and the support. Not to read a document you have before you and use up that time, but I want to just highlight one thing, that we offer no objection to the final design of the revised project to be 155 feet or less. And that was a stipulation that was added on after much discussion. So it goes to 155, but it doesn't mean it has to go that high. We ask that there be ongoing discussions with the community to really get what the community wants. I've met with the developers, I've met with the community. No one wants to be a bad partner, no one wants to have this kind of relationship. So I ask that you pay close attention. The community board also has, in addition to these 2 town hall meetings, 10 standing committees that deal with subject matters. So we've been reviewing this throughout. So if we hear about education, we've been dealing with education on a monthly basis as it relates to the development of this project, and as well as, I believe the commission's aware, Inwood is being redeveloped. So these are issues that we're dealing with on a regular basis. I ask the commission to consider our resolutions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ali. I note that the application and the presentation by the applicants was for a building at 158 feet, not 155 feet. And I just want to clarify whether those 3 feet are meaningful from the community board's perspective.
So I believe everyone here is familiar with that. I can only speak to what we passed through resolutions. So I don't know the answer to that, Chairman. I know that in our resolution, it has 155 feet. I could tell you from my recollection of yesterday's meetings, we did not discuss the difference between 158 to 155. I'm not sure if those 3 feet has a technical, professional significance. I don't know.
Ms. Levin and then Ms. Delos.
I really don't have a question. I just wanted to commend you for being able to get a resolution to us on such short notice and for showing up today, because community board's participation in this process is really important to us. As you know, there's several members of the commission who've served on community boards, and we know that it doesn't often happen this way, and that sitting in your chair, it's also not easy to pull consensus together. So thank you for your good work.
So thank you for that. If I could tell you that last night at 11:30 p.m., the chair of our housing committee, Wayne Benjamin, sent me this copy. Since you made the comment, I'll tell you that I signed this resolution on my kitchen table with my son sitting in my lap asking me, "What are you doing?" And I'm an attorney by trade. I just came from court, so I may almost refer to you as the court. But this was so important that I made sure that the community board was here. Like the decision, don't like the decision, the process was fair.
Thank you. Ms. Deluz.
Mr. Ali, thanks for being here, and again, thanks for the extraordinary efforts that you and the community board have gone through to provide this information to us. I'm just wondering, there's a part of your letter that you signed this morning makes mention of the capacity issues and the impact issues, and in particular, calling on elected officials to look at the utility infrastructure. I'm just wondering, what means how successful do you think that's going to be? Because obviously that's a real concern that exists. And obviously this particular project has brought it to light, and I'm sure it's existed for a while, but what's the path forward on that? And besides the issues that are noted here about the impacts or potential impacts to the park and the cloisters, are there any other particular concerns that the community board voiced about the environmental review that we should be aware of?
Well, there was, to take the first part of your question, you're correct that the issue of the utility, the infrastructure, subsurface has been a concern on not just the projects that are coming within Washington Heights and Inwood, but just in general. This just happens to be another vehicle where we could highlight that this is an ongoing need. Regardless of what happens, this is an ongoing need, and particularly will become even more of a need when we talk about the redevelopment of Inwood. Con Ed has to be brought in. I can imagine that we will take this up at individual committee levels. We have a district service cabinet meeting where we have elected officials from different stakeholders present, and this will be a pointed question at every chance we can get.
Okay.
And as to the environmental review, again, that is also, I believe there's been a call for a proper environmental review done here. I would hope that the developer met with them, are listening to this, and that we'll get one done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. Just let me say two things. First of all, the applicant's formal application to us, I'm informed, was at 155 feet, so the community board was indeed accurate, and I apologize. And second, I just want to underscore what Commissioner Levin said. Whether a community board is in favor of an application or opposed to an application, the more that we have a better understanding of the nuances of the community board's view, and the more we see community boards testify here, the more informed we can be. And so I just want to thank you for showing up on such short notice. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the commissioners. Have a good day.
We'll now switch to those in opposition. The next speaker is Graham Carullo? Is that Carallo? Serrallo, pardon me.
Thank you for having me. My name is Graham Serrallo. I am with a neighborhood coalition called Northern Manhattan is Not for Sale. And I'm going to read a statement that we prepared. Actually, it was prepared by one of our neighborhood residents. But I'd just like to say first that the town hall meeting that was referenced on Monday, that was attended by over 150 residents, every resident who spoke against this project. And that included numerous community board members. So please take that into consideration. It is clear to residents of the immediate neighborhood that the proposed spot rezoning of this site is intended to poke a hole in the dike for developers of luxury housing, which will open the floodgates to similar construction throughout our neighborhood. This presents an existential threat to our community, which owes its existence and continued toehold as a working-class enclave in the borough of Manhattan to the relatively large stock of rent-stabilized housing in the area. While the developers and the elected officials they have been negotiating with are trying to distract residents via promises of affordable units in the proposed buildings, this will in no way counterbalance the thousands of local families who are likely to be displaced as a result of opening the floodgates to luxury market rate housing in our neighborhood. Gentrification is already underway, and landlords are already doing everything they can to get long-term tenants out and flip their units out for the stabilization system, out of the stabilization system. There's a strong precedent for landlord abuse in this area, such as the 2009 Vantage case, which resulted in a class action settlement and Attorney General oversight for 3 years. Using the map of destabilized units between 2007 and 2014 created by activist John Kraus, the Housing Committee of our local community board and concerned residents have begun to sift through data in the neighborhood to find patterns of abuse. It seems clear that landlords in the immediate vicinity of 4650 are running afoul of rent laws, and construction of this sort will only increase the incentive for them to ratchet up their abusive tactics, forcing long-term tenants out and permanently decimating the stock of affordable housing in the neighborhood. It is clear to everyone in the community that this proposal sets a terrible precedent that will allow essentially any site in the neighborhood to be carved out with a special zoning to suit the needs of luxury housing developers. If this rezoning goes through, the floodgates will open, resulting in a feeding frenzy by developers that will ultimately displace thousands of working-class families and the decimation of the last substantial contiguous chunk of rent-stabilized housing in the borough of Manhattan. In the 2 public meetings that I have been to in the neighborhood regarding the proposed rezoning, not a single resident spoke in favor of the rezoning. This project represents an existential threat to our community, and I encourage you to vote against this approval.
Thank you, Mr. Cirillo. Questions? Ms. Delauze.
Yes.
Thank you very much for testifying and for coming, and certainly for underscoring the importance that the existing rent-stabilized housing stock is and has to the neighborhood. I'm just wondering, and if you or other members, are you a member of the community board?
I'm not a member of the community board.
And I'm just wondering, obviously there's a conversation that's going on right now among a number of tenant activists and folks that support affordable housing, in particular maintaining rent-stabilized housing, around anti-harassment and certifications and doing that through citywide legislation.
Yes.
Is that so that you're aware of that and that's something?
Yeah, we are aware of that, and we are advocating for that as well. And I just should also say that we are affordable housing advocates. One of our coalition members is Met Council on Housing, and we are okay with seeing the site developed for retail and for community use. But market rate housing poses a tremendous risk at destabilizing the surrounding units and displacing residents. So we're going to be at a net loss for affordable housing, and that's what we're afraid of.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. The next speaker is Jennifer Fox. From Inwood Preservation.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. I'm Jennifer Fox. I'm with Inwood Preservation. We're opposed to the spot rezoning of the historic Packard site, as well as the application of MIH at this location. My testimony today focuses on the contention that the trade-off of increased density is worth the proposed new affordable housing units at the site. It is not. Specifically, presentations of this revised proposal all emphasize that so long as the affordable component is keyed to Inwood rather than citywide incomes, increased density should be palatable here. This argument, unfortunately, misled the community by omitting a critical fact. Not one presentation made to the community acknowledged the likely impact of the pending lawsuit filed against the city by the Anti-Discrimination Center, or ADC. As I'm sure you are all aware, this lawsuit is poised to eliminate any community preference for the affordable housing component of this development. If this lawsuit succeeds, and since they've been successful in similar lawsuits, we have every reason to believe they will, it will be impossible to give community residents a preference for these units. Lower AMI percentages and a greater proportion of affordable units are not an appropriate trade-off for density because no one can guarantee that one unit will benefit to this community, and worse, unfortunately, the developers have not been honest with the community in that they have failed to disclose this critical fact in their presentations. And furthermore, as Commissioner Delauze pointed out in her questioning, The community has also not received clarity regarding the permanence of affordability, and the community board approval surely did not reflect that clarity that was provided today. Since this project will likely not provide affordable housing units for this community, and that's the sole basis of any support for this out-of-scale development, it's right to focus instead on what the market rate units will mean for Inwood. Simply put, the trade-off of a few new units isn't worth it. This project sends the message that Inwood is open for business when it comes to spot rezoning, and due to its size and visibility as the gateway to Inwood, will single-handedly raise the rent ceiling in Inwood. This will provide other Inwood property owners with even more incentive to maximize their property values by squeezing out rent-stabilized tenants. In sum, more affordable housing units will be lost than gained as a result of this development. We need tools in Inwood to address the sneaky, quasi-legal mechanisms of displacement prevalent in our neighborhood, such as preferential rents with potentially false underlying stabilized rent, frivolous MCI increases, and so on. The city habitually says that they're powerless because rent stabilization is in the purview of the state. In that case, the city has two legitimate options that would be fair to Inwood. One, cease any rezoning activity that will further raise market expectations and thus increase landlord incentives to displace tenants, or two, get creative. My written testimony includes a few of those creative suggestions, but in the absence of same, I would urge the commission to vote no on both the ULURP action for increased density and MIH on this site.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Questions for Ms. Fox? Ms. Delauze.
How are you?
Good.
I would like to hear one or two of your creative ideas, because I think you have a number of good points, and for those that don't know, Ms. Fox knows a lot about this matter.
Thanks. So I think that some of the suggestions that have come up in light of East New York rezoning and other discussions, such as the anti-harassment proposal, really relate to non-rent stabilized issues. They don't get into the meat of some of the crazier things that we're looking at. And particularly, you know, when we look at giving, one of the proposals is to give individual assistance to folks who are being displaced in housing court. Problem is Inwood buildings are typically mixed income, and doing it on a case-by-case legal aid income-oriented basis doesn't address the wild mixed income range of our buildings. What we're seeing is building-wide abuses that are very sophisticated. What we would like to see is assistance to tenant organizations to combat larger landlords and larger property owners instead of individuals. We are interested in providing assistance to folks to make them aware of their rights to seek rent histories and also go back to HCR and look at, for instance, when there is a preferential rent, it turns out that you can contest the preferential rent if the underlying rent stabilized rent was set illegally high. The problem is that in Inwood, we've got a middle income community. Folks aren't rich enough to afford lawyers, and they're not poor enough to get assistance. And I think you're going to be seeing this discussion as more and more Inwood rezoning comes up. This is a way in which the city absolutely can meaningfully intervene in the process, and which it has not come to the table with at all, either on this rezoning matter or the larger Inwood rezoning that you'll be seeing before you in the next couple of months. So those are a couple of thoughts in terms of tenant education and meaningful assistance that I think the city really could be much more proactive about.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Efron.
So I'm trying to connect some dots, and I don't want to put words into your mouth, but are you saying that Inwood Preservation would be comfortable with the height and density of this building if there were anti-harassment or other means to maintain rent stabilization for the middle income, and it didn't lead to additional?
We divided up our testimony among our various neighborhood residents. This is just my job today was to outline the ways in which the affordable housing presentation as it is actually doesn't meet what the community's concerns and such. We are more in line with what Fort Tryon Trust and others have said, which is that we would far prefer at maximum 10-story building, because what we're concerned about here really is that it's not so much the affordable housing units that you're adding, but what adding this much market rate housing does to this community and how that's going to cause displacement. And we're also an umbrella organization that encompasses all kinds of design and historic preservation concerns and are not limited to affordable housing. Thank you. That answers.
Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, can I just, I'm familiar with the lawsuit, but I'm curious about the implications that you outlined.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned that, it would be impossible to give community preference should the lawsuit prevail. If that's the case across the city, does that then mean that these deeper levels of affordability are no longer desirable, or?
So I think that's a really valid question. And taking off an Inwood hat, you could say the whole city needs affordable housing, doesn't matter if you're a community resident. However, as a neighborhood advocate, I would say that if you can't guarantee the housing for folks in the community, at least you've got to tell the community that that's what's going to happen so that the community can make the decision about how they're viewing the proposal. And in this case, we didn't really have that opportunity because it was not disclosed. But I see what you're saying, that it does, in fact, the fact of this lawsuit does, in fact, I think, compromise the way in which inclusionary, I guess it compromises the support that a lot of people would have had for the MIH. And I think that actually Councilmember Lander had a statement about it last year that's very useful on this matter, where he expressed exactly that concern, saying that he was concerned that this lawsuit could threaten community support for affordable housing. He's absolutely right. But if you don't tell people about it, then you get the support. So I think that that's really something that we're objecting to here. At least be transparent and let people know that they're not getting anything. Is that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
May I?
Ms. Deluz.
I appreciate you raising the lawsuit, and I think it's a complicated matter for those of us that are intimately involved with the topic, both from a community perspective and from an affordable housing perspective. It hasn't had its day in court yet. Understand it's next month. I understand the city's going to vigorously defend the community preference policy under fair housing grounds. And, I think there's certainly a fair argument to be made in either case, and I think we'll see how it ends up. But I think your point about being transparent about it is a valid one.
Yeah, and I would just add to Ms. Deluz that, as she said, the city is vigorously defending this lawsuit, and largely on the grounds that Councilmember Lander indicated, which is that we believe the city has established the appropriate balance between accessibility to affordable housing citywide and accessibility to affordable housing for those in the neighborhood where the housing is being built. And I think at this point, the city is quite confident that it's going to prevail on fair housing grounds, but obviously we'll wait for court to determine that. But the city is quite confident on this issue.
Yeah, I think we all agree and hope for the same thing. It's just unfortunate that I feel that the community support for this project was predicated on maybe not telling the whole story.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Fox? Thank you. Next speaker is Catherine O'Sullivan.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of City Planning Commission. I am here representing my co-op. I'm also a member of Moving Forward Unidos, from whom you heard already, and I am a member of Inwood Preservation. I'm asking you to reject the rezoning. This is the only remaining Albert Kahn building in New York City. Albert Kahn was an innovative architect. He was an early advocate of reinforced concrete in building construction, the original international starchitect. He designed 521 plants and factories under the first 5-year plan in the early 20th century Soviet Union. He is recognized as the architect connected with the auto industry, especially in Detroit, where his company still operates. The company is also based in Sao Paulo, Brazil, international. As an immigrant, I do not understand the reckless destruction of the heritage and historic fabric of my adopted home, New York City. This Packard building should not be razed. Built in 1926 in the Art Deco style, it calls to mind an ocean liner. Although not Detroit's Fisher building, it is Inwood's Albert Kahn building. At the very least, the facade, a handsome terracotta, should be preserved and incorporated into whatever construction is eventually built on the site. In 1910, the New York Times noted that Manhattan is the automobile center of the country. This building is part of the history and heritage of Inwood and New York City. One of the joys of living, visiting, experiencing the city is to see its different cultural periods, sometimes in one streetscape. Others have addressed the out-of-context bulk, the environmental stresses. The few truly affordable family units provided by this proposed development does not balance what Inwood residents and New York City would lose. Please reject the application. And by the way, I do want to address the fact that the Community Board 12 resolution came in at such short notice. At the town hall on Monday, residents, the 150 residents who were there, pretty much unanimously speaking against the revised proposal, were told the next meeting, important meeting, was this hearing. No one mentioned that this topic and the resolution would be before the community board yesterday evening. If it had, we would have been there to speak against it. As it was slipped in under new business. So with respect to Chairman Ali, it was not quite as transparent as we would have liked it. However, that is as it is. I would ask why the previous owner of the site sold the property to Acadia Trust. I believe it was because it would have been too expensive to clean up the site.
Thank you, Ms. O'Sullivan.
Thank you.
Questions to Ms. O'Sullivan? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Marjorie Clark, also from Inwood Preservation. Welcome, Ms. Clark.
Thank you. It's my first time, too.
I think we're going to reverse it and ask you to bring us tapes. I went down the
I'm
wrong
Maggie
path.
Clark, PhD in environmental science, a longtime resident of Inwood for 40 years, founder of the Riverside Inwood Neighborhood Garden, and co-founder of Inwood Preservation. We have over 130 members now. We get bigger every day. Our purpose is to keep Inwood a peaceful bedroom community of low-rise housing and large public parks and strong community. We think it's very important to fight the onslaught of spot zoning requests like this, allowing buildings that are 2 to 3 times the size of the pre-existing housing stock. This is not what planning is all about. This is actually a destruction of planning principles. We fear that what you might allow is a more important a precedent that other building owners and builders are sitting on the sidelines salivating at the opportunity to line our parks with tall buildings. Adding such density to Inwood taxes the terribly old, decrepit infrastructure, which is 70 to 180 years old. We had a big feeder cable disaster in 1999. Adding buildings of this size is just going to make things worse. Broadway, the only through street in the entire neighborhood, is already maxed out with full buses, the routes taken over by buses that go to the multi-line garage, and the garbage and recycling trucks that use the multi-district sanitation garage. So it is already terribly overburdened. There's not going to be enough parking either because that's already maxed out. So just adding a huge building like this is going to make things worse. The subway lines are packed even at midnight from personal experience. This process was not fair or representative of Inwood residents, unlike what the CB12 chair said. They willfully ignored the residents, which spoke out at the meeting just last Monday night. I'm personally outraged that members of CB12 who witnessed hundreds of the local Inwood residents in opposition disingenuously misrepresented us and ignored their own community, their own committee protocols to rush this resolution through without notice to the public. And the public who spoke against the 15-story building just the night before. Community Board 12 asked for contextual zoning a number of years ago, but there was no response and they never followed up. We certainly need this now to protect us from future piecemeal attempts to turn our bedroom community into an extension of Midtown, and we hope that you'll rule against both of the proposals for 4650 Broadway that you are considering today.
Well timed. Thank you, Ms. Clark. Questions for Ms. Clark? Ms. Levin.
Ms. Clark, you referred to, well, you expressed your fears that this would be a precedent, that there are other developers waiting to take advantage of this and line the park with tall buildings. Yet we've heard from other speakers that there are relatively few soft sites in the neighborhood. Are there individual sites that you're particularly concerned about that we should have our eye on, or is it just the overall condition?
We know of one already that's standing on the side salivating. It's just 2 blocks south of this one.
Okay, is that the one that is
Nagel.
apparently, all right, that has another 17-story building in the works? Okay.
Yeah.
Any others besides that one?
Well, they usually don't broadcast their intent.
No, but connected people in the community sometimes know more than we do.
Sometimes we know, but sometimes we don't. I mean, we didn't even know what our own community board was doing behind our backs last night.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Clark? Thank you very much, Ms. Clark. Next speaker is Robert Jackson. Former council member. Welcome, Mr. Jackson.
Well, good afternoon. I had prepared my testimony with a good morning. But good afternoon, commissioners and chair and vice chair.
Thank God it's not a good evening, so.
I know, and I haven't had breakfast, but it's okay. My name is Robert Jackson. I'm a resident of Northern Manhattan and former New York City Council member representing Northern Manhattan. I'm a Democratic district leader from Northern Manhattan, and I must be open about it. I'm a candidate for the New York State Senate for Northern Manhattan, just in case you don't know. I am a member of Northern Manhattan is Not for Sale, which is a coalition of tenant organizations and residents of Northern Manhattan, and we are opposed to the Sherman Plaza development, inclusive of all of the latest developments as told to us 2 nights ago by Councilmember Adonis Rodriguez and Borough President Gail Brewer. And I agree with what everyone said who opposed it. No mention at the meeting was that the community board was going to take this issue up the next night. And I agree with tweets and other things that there were 150 residents there, and almost everyone spoke against the project. But previously, even in previous meetings before that, almost everyone spoke against the project. And in fact, for a vote at the March meeting of the community board at the Y, most of the members of CB12 raised their hand in objection, and over 100 residents raised their hand in objection. So I say to you that the concerns that people have are real. And if you live in Northern Manhattan, you know exactly what I'm referring to. So let me get to the point. One, everyone is concerned that this will lead to gentrification, forcing out more residents of Northern Manhattan and Inwood, where the average family income is about $37,000 a year. The last census data showed that approximately 18,000 to 20,000 people in Northern Manhattan was lost. And where did most of them go? To the Bronx to try to find affordable housing. And in fact, the city council district lines shifted so much because the residents was lost. Where I live now, I don't even live in the 7th councilmatic district that I represented. I live in the 10th, which is represented by Adonis Rodriguez. Number 2, the Fort Tryon Park Trust, you heard what he had to say as far as the impact that's going to have on Fort Tryon Park and the cloisters. I don't need to reiterate that. His information is on the record. And then number three, the issue and concern to what has been said about the infrastructure concerns. But I was at a tenant meeting last night where they don't have gas. And the Con Edison people had said to the residents, they were shaking their heads because the main line was over 100 years old, and now these tenants are going to be without gas. And I hear it all the time. As an ex-representative, people are still coming to me with issues and concerns about the infrastructure and about being evicted from their home. Residents that have been in the apartments for 40 years and being evicted. Lastly, I want to say that this project does not meet the needs of our community. And for the hardworking families in Northern Manhattan, and given all of the testimony at public hearings and briefings, we need low and moderate income housing permanent. That's what we need. And that's what Northern Manhattan is not for sale is about, in order to try to make sure that this community remains like it is for the low and moderate income families that live here. May I just take 30 seconds more, Mr. Chair?
30 seconds.
Thank you. As you know, you've been reading in the papers about everything that's happening with the real estate. And one of the issues was the West Harlem rezoning, in which the Dance Theater of Harlem was involved with. I was a city council member at that time where I agreed to increase their zoning so they can have 2 more floors on this nonprofit space. And now, 3.5, 4 years later, it was sold to a developer. And that's the concerns and issues that people have overall, not only in our area, but around the city. And I thank you for the opportunity to come in front of all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Questions? Mr. Knuckles.
Councilman, and I'll refer to you as I know you predominantly. First of all, thanks for coming down, Bob, and letting us know where you stand, as you always do. And having waited so long, I should at least ask you a question. And that is, the developers, the owners, I should say, could build as of right. And we've heard testimony about 10 stories, but our information indicates that an as-of-right project could rise to 17 stories.
Sure.
And presumably be all market. So given that reality or possibility, and the options that are put before us, what do you think should happen?
Well, as I said, the position, the group that I'm a part of, we will fight rather than switch, basically. We would fight rather than switch because we realize that the impact, even though that it may happen, is going to be devastating on our community. And thousands will be displaced as a result of all of the things that have been said by previous speakers. We realize that. And this is the fight and struggle that we have not only in Northern Manhattan, but around the city of New York, and especially in low-income and moderate-income communities. So it is what it is, and that's our position.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Deleuze.
No, it's okay.
I'm sorry.
The Vice Chair covered it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Jackson? Thank you very much. The next speaker is Rebecca Carell.
If we're going to order cakes, could it be ice cream cake?
We'll get there.
Good morning. I'm Rebecca Carroll. I'm a resident of Washington Heights in
Sorry for
Inwood.
mispronouncing your name.
That's,
so.
You're not the first. Robert is a very tough act to follow. We've known each other for probably over 40 years, because we're both really long-time residents. My children and grandchildren went to school in Washington Heights. Anyway, go back a long way. And I'm also a frequent user of Fort Tryon Park. And I want to bring us back maybe to the first speaker who spoke from the trust, because this building will have a negative impact on Fort Tryon and the cloisters. Yes, 17 or 15 is better than 27, but it's not good enough. As my understanding is that the as-of-right height of this building would be 10 stories, and I know there's controversy about that, and I wish somebody could really look into it. The developer themselves quoted 10 stories as of right in their initial EAS statement, and I don't think they would have underestimated that if they could have. It has to do with a 2007 building that was planned at 17 stories, but my understanding, and I'm not an engineer or a developer, is that it was 17 stories as of right because it was going to have some kind of special community space, the police department, I believe, which allowed for greater density. This building doesn't have that, so I think right now, realistically, an as-of-right building would probably not go much above 10 because it would be impractical to build with all the requirements. Again, I'm not an engineer, but that's my information, and we're doing a disservice if we talk about the as-of-right being 17 if it's only 10. 15 stories is too high anyway. And for people who live in Midtown or downtown, the difference between 15 and 10 stories may not sound like a lot. The developer says there are buildings at Columbus Circle that are higher on Broadway. Well, that's true. I don't want to live in Columbus Circle. I want to live in Washington Heights and Inwood. There is a big difference between a 15-story building and a 10-story building. The surrounding buildings of 4560 Broadway are 5- and 6-story buildings. The tall buildings that the developer mentions in his revised statement are blocks and blocks away. It's almost another neighborhood. So it's not really accurate to call a 15-story building contextual for this neighborhood. Most of the people who spoke in favor of this proposal do not live in Washington Heights and Inwood. And they speak in general about affordable housing, which of course we all need. But you don't ruin a park space and threaten the views from the cloisters just to get affordable housing when there are other locations. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you, Ms. Carroll.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Pat Courtney.
This is my first time here, too, so forgive me for my quirks. Good afternoon, commissioners and Commissioner Weisbrod. Inwood, Manhattan was selected as one of the Historic District Council's first 6 to celebrate communities in 2011. At the time, the triangulated valley between Fort Tryon and Fort George Hills was left out of the study map of Inwood, which then showed the southern boundary as Dyckman Street. While adding the valley section to the map in 2014, we discovered that the also triangulated corner of Broadway and Sherman Avenue actually marks the southern entrance or gateway to Inwood. The Packard Showroom is a significant historic structure on this gateway site, designed by Prussian-born architect Albert Kahn, who has been called the foremost industrial architect of his day, and built in 1926 for the Packard Motor Car Company. The structure makes a powerful use of the large lot on which it stands, contrasting and enhancing the surrounding streets and landscape which were developed in the early era of the automobile in the style known as Art Deco. The dynamic 2-story triangulated showroom is actually a precursor of streamlined modern. Resembling a ship's prow, the building also functions as a perspective device in the cityscape. Looking north at the Packard Showroom from the intersection of Broadway and Sherman Avenue, one sees to the west along Broadway Fort Tryon Park, which you have heard described earlier, one of only 6 Manhattan and 10 New York City scenic landmarks. The Tower of the Cloisters Museum, which is part of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, is just visible above the Packard site when trees are not in leaf. To the east, up Sherman Avenue, a dramatic straight-shot view all the way north through the gridded portion of Inwood to the Bronx. These entrance views to Inwood pivot off the low Packard Showroom, forming a conjunction of the largely natural landscape rising to the west and the flattened and leveled grid of New York City to the east, a rare before and after view of the history of the development of Manhattan Island. A few years ago, Acadia Properties offered a plan for a lower structure that would incorporate the restored Packard Showroom as its base, a far more acceptable plan. Adaptive reuse would be welcomed by the community and would help to preserve both the history and streetscape of Inwood and the integrity of Fort Tryon Park and the Cloisters for all residents of Inwood and the many city, state, national, and international visitors welcomed at these sites each year. Potential losses to the neighborhood by permitting an overscale building in such a strategic position would be inestimable, as has been described by others today. Inwood has not received parity on the protections of its historic structures. We request an opportunity to send a list of other structures that are threatened, other such structures that are threatened. Inwood currently has no historic districts and few protected resources of a historical nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Courtney. Questions, Ms. Courtney? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Kelly Carroll.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Kelly Carroll, and I am with the Historic Districts Council. As you've heard this afternoon, Fort Tryon Park is one of 6 designated scenic landmarks in Manhattan. It's characterized as an urban respite and removed from the built environment. The park was selected as the site for the cloisters because the intention was to provide an isolated setting within a park removed from any city structures and to assure undisturbed views of the landscape. That's according to the designation report. The perimeter of Fort Tryon Park is characterized by buildings of 6 stories, and the proposed rezoning at number 4650 will be a severe punctuation of scale along Broadway and from the vast views within the park. While the building will be tailored to be more inclusive in its affordability, this is exactly why community boards and groups citywide were wary of MIH, as this building sacrifices neighborhood context and respect for the landmarked park. In a cursory look at large parks citywide, HDC has noticed that the majority of large parks, meaning more than 1 acre, border on areas which are either low density, R5 or lower, or fall under aesthetic regulations, for example, historic districts. We could strongly suggest that this is a positive thing from an urban planning perspective, and that large parks should at least be shielded from the worst effects of unnatural intrusion. HDC encourages the City Planning Commission today to perform a study of the border condition of large parks in Manhattan and beyond, towards the end of encouraging a transitional development zone around them, whether through viewshed protections, lower density, or some other mechanism, in order that New Yorkers can have the occasional break from the city without leaving its borders. Regarding the building, we would like to see it incorporated into the base if this does proceed. As we heard, it was constructed in 1926. It was designed by a prolific Detroit architect, Albert Kahn, who also designed the Packard plant where this building's wares were originally manufactured. Kahn was one of the leading architects of the early 20th century, and his work is notable for his patents of reinforced concrete, which set the industry standard throughout the century for factory design in the United States and the world. Examples of Kahn's auto buildings are becoming rare, as all of his remaining buildings in Manhattan are currently threatened with demolition. These include the Packard Service Building on 11th Avenue and the Ford Motor Company building at 1710 Broadway in Times Square. Known Kahn buildings are designated New York City landmarks, and several auto industry-related buildings designed by this architect have been lost. At the very least, please preserve the base. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Carroll. Any questions, Ms. Carroll? Ms. Ortiz.
I have a quick question. Do you, at its current height, and I perhaps should have asked this earlier, do you have a sense of whether it will be visible from the cloisters?
There were submitted, we didn't, not with today, but there were independent studies showing the views from the cloisters, yes, and the impact.
Of this lower height?
Yes. Of the as of right and of the 23, I think, because
Yeah,
this was
but
a
I'm
few.
asking on the 15.
No, not that I have seen.
Okay. So we don't know at this point, or do we have a sense of whether this will in fact be visible from the cloisters at this new height?
I believe because of the topography, it will be.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Ms. Carroll. And just to, obviously, the applicant has to submit a revised analysis, so we will see what the views are. Next speaker is Marcel Negrete. Is it Negrete? Am I pronouncing that correctly, Negrete?
Yes.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Marcel Negrete. I'm project manager with the Municipal Art Society of New York. We welcome the opportunity to provide comments on the Sherman Plaza project. This testimony is based on the project as it was proposed until last week, not the updated version which we just saw earlier this morning. AMS looks forward to reviewing the latest version of the proposed project and providing further comments. First, precedent for similar development along the Fort Tryon Park. MAS maintains that any new development along the Broadway corridor and Fort Tryon Park should be consistent with the existing neighborhood fabric and avoid shadow impacts on the park. Currently, the area east of Fort Tryon Park is characterized by 5 to 7-story residential buildings. Development pressure in the neighborhood has already led to at least one proposed out-of-scale development nearby. Specifically, Larga Vista Companies is seeking a height and bulk variance from the Board of Standards and Appeals to construct a 19-story building, which is less than a quarter of a mile south of the Sherman Plaza site. As such, the Sherman Plaza project represents an important opportunity for the city to champion sound planning that considers the cumulative effect of non-contextual development. Second, adverse impacts on visual resources and views. We echo the same concerns from previous organizations on the impact that this development could have on the designated scenic landmark of Fort Tryon. Regarding housing affordability, during the public review process, MAS testified many times expressing support in principle for the mandatory inclusionary housing and confident in the public review process. However, MAS' position has always been that affordable housing should be targeted to accurately address the needs of the individual neighborhood. As the first project to incorporate MIH, MAS is concerned that the affordability level proposed on the Sherman Plaza project does not meet the needs of the community. As proposed until last week, 30% of the development's residential floor area would be allocated for its residents with incomes at 80% of the area median income, or approximately $65,000 per year for a family of 3. However, the median household income of the surrounding neighborhood is only approximately $52,000, making the affordable units in the project out of reach for many that currently live in the neighborhood. Fourth, a critical need for sound planning and development. The broader Inwood Washington Heights neighborhood is facing major changes, evidenced by the Inwood NYC Planning Initiative, a comprehensive planning study currently underway to guide the future rezoning and development of a 100-acre area northeast of the Sherman Plaza site. Although it is not part of the initiative, the Sherman Plaza project exhibits a microcosm of the issues that the entire neighborhood will need to address as development pressures mount. Mindful of the proposal at 4566 Broadway, which is the Larga Vista Companies building, and the prospect of a large-scale rezoning of the easternmost portions of Inwood, it is imperative that the city carefully examine all facets of the Sherman Plaza development, including the potential long-term impacts on the neighborhood for Tryon Park and the socioeconomic conditions of the area. As mentioned earlier, we look forward to reviewing and providing comments on the latest version of the proposed projects and environmental studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Negret. Questions? Thank you. Next speaker is Liz Ritter. And if there's anyone else who wishes to speak and hasn't signed up, please do so right now.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Loris Ritter. Liz Ritter, this is not my first rodeo, no cake for you. I live at 140 Cabrini Boulevard with my husband, our adult son who graduated from college last week. His older
Congratulations.
sister, thank you. His older sister no longer lives at home, but my children were raised in that park. It's not an exaggeration to say that we have each spent thousands of hours there playing hide and seek, studying Torah under the canopy of trees, and so much more. I have lived in this neighborhood, well, that neighborhood, for almost 35 years. I was an original member of the Friends of Fort Tryon Park. I am a member of the Fort Tryon Park Trust. Somebody lift up my bag that has the Fort Tryon Park Trust logo on it, right over there. Or not. I am also a member of Community Board 12 and have been on its Parks and Cultural Affairs Committee for since about 1994. As an aside, I actually resent the several prior speakers' allegations of opacity and welcome questions from you to clarify how that process went last night with respect to our resolution. That's not part of my testimony here. I'm also the founder of the Hudson Heights Owners Coalition, representing 31 co-ops and condos in Western Washington Heights, which are home to more than 5,000 taxpayers. In that capacity, I wrote to y'all and to a council member and the borough president asking that you reject Acadia's proposal. All of our member buildings are homes to people who would have overlooked that project. It is tremendously gratifying that when the people spoke, government listened. Thank you to Borough President Brewer, Council Member Rodriguez, and to my Community Board 12 colleagues. With vastly reduced height, increased affordable housing, some of which is deeply affordable, and all of which was understood to be permanent. Limits on frontage to discourage big box retailers, though, not gonna lie, I will not say no to a Trader Joe's. There are exactly 0 supermarkets within blocks of the proposed site. And a new zoning category that would limit the height and provide context. I regard this proposal not only as a tremendous improvement, but as a victory for community organizing. But as you have heard, many concerns remain. Even at only 15 stories or 155 feet, the building would still be seen from the Linden Terrace, the Cloisters and Cafe lawns, and will still follow users of the Dongan lawn into the park like a tall, creepy neighbor. There's also a serious, I have pictures, by the way. There's also a serious issue with parking, conflicts over which have led quite literally to fights in the streets. So with all of that, it is shocking to me that you all managed to issue a negative declaration and say that an environmental impact study is not necessary. Reasonable people can and do disagree as to how negative the negative impacts are and the extent to which they might be mitigated by some of the positive aspects of this proposed development as revised. But to say that there were no negative impacts for a 27-story building and that there are no negative impacts now is patently absurd. That's really all I got on that. This failure is the subject of a lawsuit of which you've heard, of which I'm also a co-petitioner. I have many other things to say. Thank God I write faster than I talk. You've got it. I would encourage you to read this and take it to heart. I also want to say that while gentrification is a real and serious concern, that's not what this is about. We need a governor who actually gives a damn about affordable housing and community renewal, and we need a Democratic Senate that can really protect New York City's rent regulations. That's not what this is about.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ritter.
Want pictures?
Questions for Ms. Ritter? Ms. Levin.
Ms. Ritter, I would like to take you up on your offer to elaborate a little bit on what happened at the community board and the
Sure.
how we got from a town hall meeting on Monday night where 150 people, we are told,
Yes.
spoke against it, to all of a sudden it's on the agenda as new business.
Totally reasonable question, and with with at least one faulty assumption embedded into it. It was not on the agenda as a set agenda item. The way community boards work by city charter, by our bylaws, in a way that is actually quite familiar not only to all of the people who testified by virtue of their presence at many community board meetings. There is an agenda which includes various reports. It may include reports by elected officials if they are there. It includes a public session. It includes committee reports, of which, as Shah testified, we have 10. And within those are the resolutions that have been circulated to the board and to the public in advance. Following that is an item of new business, and as has been at the bottom of every agenda for at least the 2 decades that I've been on the board, is an item that says new business, items presented under new business are part of the agenda. As you know, this project, an amended project, was submitted to you on Friday the 20th. It was received by the community board on Monday the 23rd. There was a public hearing, a town hall. There had been a public hearing on March 2nd. There was a town hall on the evening of the 23rd. And while there were a number of people who spoke quite passionately and quite reasonably against the issues of gentrification, the overwhelming majority of the comments related to gentrification in general, the state's utter failure to protect affordable housing pursuant to rent regulation, which is managed in Albany, not at City Hall, and to a number of things that were not directly germane to the items in this project. There also were several people who spoke in favor of the project in terms of the kinds of benefits that I described and that you've heard other people describe, that you heard Shah describe, and that's in my testimony and the community board's resolution. So we have to take, we have to pass resolutions and we have to make decisions not based on the reality that we wish we had or the reality that we think we deserve. We have to go based on the reality that is in front of us. There is an as of right for this developer to develop something that is significantly taller than what was proposed, certainly larger than what's there and that nobody's going to like, that has no affordable housing, no guarantees with respect to commercial development, no contextual zoning, no height cap. So we wind up getting a number of those things. In terms of landmarking the Packard building, that's a shanda. I mean, it is just awful that that was never landmarked. I would like to encourage you, and it's in my testimony, to require, it means it's a shame, it's Yiddish.
I'm turning to my friend.
No worries, no worries. No cake, just Yiddish. But I would encourage the Planning Commission to require that this development include a preservation of the facade that's incorporated into the whatever winds up getting built, in much the same way that the Audubon Ballroom at 165th Street and Broadway has its facade preserved as part of the university's development. I hope that answers your question. Close enough, thank you.
Any other questions to Ms. Ritter? Thank you, Ms. Ritter. Ms. Ritter, let me just ask you, you are listed in opposition, you signed up in opposition to what is before us. And I just want to clarify.
The reason why I am listed, you know, you force people to either say they are opposed or to say they are in favor. So if someone is in favor with reservations, then that gets categorized as opposed. Or so it has been described to me when I've testified here and when I've testified at the City Council. My request is that because I would like the Commission to require preservation of the existing building as part of the design incorporated into whatever else gets built. And because, as you'll see in my written testimony, I would like for the lot to be built out a little bit more so that you can squash that Play-Doh and have it be a little bit shorter. That is the nature of my opposition. When you were briefed on Monday, 2 of you said that this proposal represents a step in the right direction. That suggests that at least 2 of you think that there is room to improve further still on the proposal, and I would like to see you do that. We deserve that.
So just, I appreciate that, and I appreciate that you couldn't verbally present your entire testimony, which we all now have in writing and we will read. But given what you just said, would it be fair to characterize you as in favor with reservations, opposed with concerns? I just want to, I just,
You know,
for
my basic problem is baby bathwater. You know, I like babies. I don't want to throw this one out. I guess I would say in support with reservations.
Okay.
I want to be your conscience that pushes you further. And for the record,
I'm not trying to
seriously,
push you, I'm just
no
trying to ask you what
EIS.
you, okay.
So I am still a party to that lawsuit because I'd really like for you to study it and come up with an EIS or order the nice people who aren't in the empty seats to do that, because they should do it on their nickel.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Ritter. Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on, oh, wait a second.
Ma'am.
Mr. Cantor.
Question, you made a reference to, quote, crushing the building down. Do you know the floor-to-floor heights of the apartment floors?
I do not.
Okay.
I mean, what near as I can gather, the ground floor and the next floor up, I mean, just looking at the drawing, seem to be higher, and looking at the way it's stacked, going, I think it's 65 feet, 105 feet, 155 feet, that leads me to believe that you've got, in the first piece of the cake, the floors are the highest. In the middle, which I'm guessing is where the affordable units are going to go, is a little bit lower, so that's probably 8 feet. And then the top stack of 5 adds 50 feet, so 10 feet.
We can get that answer from the applicant.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I can send you the pictures that I have, but they're printed on, inelegantly printed on scrap paper.
we accept everything.
Okay.
So, Ms. Deluz.
Ms. Ritter, I just want to say thank you for coming, and thank you for your testimony and your ability to think on your feet so quickly. One thing I would just say, so everyone knows, is that when MIH or voluntary inclusionary housing is used, there's a requirement to spread the units out throughout the entire building and not have it just on the lower floors.
Good to know.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ritter. And is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this matter? And hearing none, if you sign up, have you spoken? You can't, that's it. One bite. You can submit written testimony if you'd like. If not, this hearing is closed. And Mr. Secretary, is there any other matter to come before us today?
Mr. Chairman, there's not.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all.